Chapter 236. After cutting off a lofty mountain with just one sword strike, Wu Qi let out a long, gloomy cry. With his body riddled with scars and the heart of a young man filled with an indescribable feeling, he stepped on a beam of light and fled back to Meng Fortress in a sorry state. What happened tonight was like the first wet dream of a young man, leaving an unforgettable memory in Wu Qi's mind. The seven-colored deer was leaping gracefully between the mountains. Sitting on its back, Yu Ji stretched her back lazily, covered her little mouth with her hand and yawned. Her fair face was tinged with an intoxicating blush, and her eyes were brimming with tears. She was smiling faintly, as if she was still reminiscing the intimate moments she spent with Wu Qi, which lasted for nearly a whole day. All of a sudden, a sonorous tune of a flute was heard coming from the top of a mountain nearby. Raising her brows in surprise, Yu Ji gave a soft cry. Suddenly, a three-colored cloud burst out from under the seven-colored deer's feet, then it soared up into the sky and flew towards the mountain. On the top of the mountain was a lady with an appearance similar to Yu Ji's that could bring calamity to the world, but she had a solemn expression, giving off a feeling that she was as pure as ice and as pure as jade. She was sitting cross-legged under a lone pine tree. In her hand was a jade flute with a strange shape. The 6-feet-long jade flute was very thin, and the color of translucent egg white. It was smooth and soft, and its inner surface was faintly exposed, with a few tiny golden runes faintly visible on the flute. At the end of the jade flute, 3 long green feathers were tied with silver silk. The feathers were bright and lustrous, emitting a smooth luster like clear water. A huge amount of spiritual energy was constantly spurting out from the feathers, nourishing the jade flute at all times. After being absorbed and transformed by the jade flute, a thread of extremely pure and rich natural energy kept flowing into the lady's finger, then spread to every corner of her body. The 7-colored deer flew up to the top of the mountain, and Yu Ji lightly leaped down from its back. She gave the lady a glance with a smile, then bowed gracefully and said, "Yu Ji offers greeting to the Empress of Daqin, elder sister Yu Yao, your majesty. May I know why elder sister is sitting here? Could it be that you are waiting for me?" Yu Yao lightly flicked the jade flute with her jade-like finger and said in an indifferent tone, "You're interested in a little boy who hasn't even grown his hair yet? If that tyrant of yours knew that you had given yourself to such a young boy, wouldn't he poke a hole in the sky?" Yu Ji giggled, walked to the side of Yu Yao and sat down slowly. With a soft voice, she said, "I've taken a fancy to this tender little girl. Could it be that his sister was also interested in him? If there is, Yu Ji will go and capture him right now, and let elder sister have a good time." Yu Ji let out an intoxicated sigh, narrowed her eyes and revealed an intoxicated smile. "Very good, Yu Ji enjoyed it very much. Yu Ji is also really strange, this is really the first time this child is having fun with a woman, why does he know so many strange tricks?" Yu Yao remained silent. She gently waved the jade flute, and a gust of wind blew through the small holes on the flute, letting out a clear buzzing noise. She frowned and said, "This kid is weird, I don't like him. I wonder why both you and Yu Tan have taken a fancy to him. Is this little boy really so good?" Yu Yao laughed, shook her head and said, "I hate people who are full of lies the most in my life. Last time, he told Yu Tan that he is cultivating some virgin technique. But this time, A light snort was heard coming from a distance, as a strong and agile black leopard suddenly leaped up to the top of the mountain like a bolt of lightning. A beautiful lady, clad in a black light armor and holding a 16-feet-long coiling dragon crescent blade, leaped down from the back of the black leopard and stood firmly in front of the 2 girls. A breeze blew across, fluttering the long hair of the lady. A threatening heroic spirit burst out from her body, and she looked like a general. She thrust the blade in her hand forcefully into the ground, and the egg-thick blade sank 3 feet deep into the ground without making a sound. The lady in black armor looked at Yu Ji, giggled and said, "Sister Yu Ji is indeed a man with no fear. You really went to pluck that Wu Qi's true yang. That little boy is indeed full of lies, and not a single word of truth came out of his mouth. To think that Yu Tan had given him a spirit pill, which helped him condense the Jin Dan. If I knew that he would spend the night with you, I would not have given him a spirit pill, but a poison instead. Yuji giggled, then winked at Yutan and said, "You are jealous that I could capture him, but he did not pay any attention to you, am I right?" "Well, Sister Yuyao is the best at scheming, and Yutan, your cultivation base is the strongest. As for Yuji, she can't decide the victory in the imperial court, and she can't fight on the battlefield. All she is good at is these little tricks." Suddenly, a trace of bitterness emerged on Yuji's face. She sighed and said, "Yuji has been using these little tricks to please others for so many years, but this is just a little fun for myself. Could it be that Sister Yuyao and Sister Yutan, must you always speak ill of me?" Yutan gave Yuji a deep look and shook her head. Yuyao, on the other hand, sighed softly and said, "All right, put away your attitude of a little girl. You can make all the men under the heaven crazy for you, but so what? To us, it is useless. We have been together for over 2,000 years, and it is our destiny. When we meet again in the future, I have no idea what kind of situation it will be. I am going to look for my man." Yuji lifted her head up and looked at a wisp of white cloud in the sky. She sighed and said, "Yuji is going to be entangled with Sister Yutan, never to be separated for the rest of their lives." "Who wants to be entangled with you for the rest of their lives?" Yutan said angrily. Yuji looked at Yutan with surprise, chuckled and said, "Yuji is going to look for King Xiangyu. He is now a minister of Great Chu. Sister Yutan is going back to Great Chu as well. Isn't Duke of Chunshan her old lover? Xiang Yu and Huang Xia are both ministers of Great Chu now. Since we are going back to look for them, doesn't that mean we have to take care of each other, never to be separated for the rest of our lives?" Yutan put on a straight face. She gripped the crescent blade tightly and said coolly, "Huang Xia, that old fool." Yuji gently swayed her body and laughed softly, "Huang Xia, that old trash." Looking at his fat body, Yuji feels uncomfortable all over. When she thought that Sister Yutan is going to send herself to that old fatty and let him have his fun, she felt that it was a waste of heaven's gift. Why don't Sister Yutan go and look for Wuqi as well? That way, that old fool will not take away your energy and waste your over 2,000 years of painstaking cultivation. A blade beam flashed. Yutan held the long blade in her hand and swung it towards Yuji's neck with a cold gleam. Yuji giggled, then took the initiative to extend her tender and beautiful long neck to the edge of the blade. A loud clang rang out. The crescent blade bounced back and sent out a large amount of sparks. However, there was not even a red mark on Yuji's fair and delicate neck. Yutan shook her wrist and swung the blade again, hacking 99 times on Yuji's body. Yuji giggled and casually took off all her clothes. Her beautiful and flawless body took the initiative to greet the blade. A series of metallic clangs kept ringing out. Sparks flew in all directions from Yuji's body, but there was not even a scratch on her. In a blink of an eye, Yutan had hacked 99 times, then abruptly sheathed the blade and stepped back. Yuji let out a moan while gasping for breath. Twisting her slender waist, she took a few steps back slowly. She looked down at her fair and flawless body complacently, giggled and said, "Yuji's celestial technique of Goddess Xian has made some achievements. Indeed, I am not afraid of any metal weapons anymore. Unless there is an innate spirit treasure, or a magical weapon that is not a metal weapon, no one can hurt even a single hair of Yuji." Yutan laughed coldly. A clump of cold mist sprayed out from her face, and her facial features changed abruptly. Although she was still as beautiful and enchanting as before, she looked completely different from her previous appearance. She took a light breath, then clenched her fist and threw a punch towards Yuji's chest. Yuji, who had been smiling sweetly all the time, suddenly had a serious look on her face. She quickly raised both of her little hands and drew a taiji symbol in front of her chest, then gently pushed both of her hands outwards. The 3 feet diameter void in front of her suddenly shattered, turning into a pitch-black hole that could not see any light. The surrounding void twisted. Yutan and Yuji trembled and retreated several tens of feet at the same time. Holding the jade flute in her hand, Yu Yao nodded with a smile and said, Yu Ji's celestial technique of goddess Xian has reached 70% mastery. Metal weapons can't hurt her at all. The 2,000 years of hard work is worth it. Yu Tan's heaven-breeding script of goddess Su has also reached 70% mastery, which is more than enough to deal with any unforeseen circumstances. You and I, the three of us, have been together for more than 2,000 years, but today, we have to separate again. Sighing lightly, Yu Yao looked up at the sky and said coolly, this is our destiny. When we meet again in the future, you and I will no longer be sisters. Even if we have to fight on the battlefield and kill each other with our own hands, this is also our destiny. Who asked our man to be such a peerless hero? Yu Ji laughed mockingly and said, peerless hero? Hee hee. Tilting her head up proudly, Yu Ji said coolly, he can't do anything about the fact that I've secretly eaten a young and tender little boy. Hee hee, I really want to see his expression when he finds out that I've had an affair with him. Yu Yao and Yu Tan exchanged a glance, then breathed out a deep sigh at the same time. Yu Tan came next to Yu Ji and gave her a tight hug. Yu Yao rose to her feet slowly and came next to both of them. She stretched out her long arms and gave both of them a tight hug. 6 streams of tears flowed down the faces of the 3 girls, and they began to weep together. But very soon, all 3 of them stopped crying at the same time. Yu Yao said coolly, what are we still complaining about when we have been together for over 2,000 years? Among us 3 sisters, as the eldest sister, I am the luckiest one. Although Yingzheng has done many wrong things, he has treated me very well. Yu Ji, Yu Tan, it's true that you've suffered a lot. But, this is our fate, and it's not up to us. Yu Yao let go of them, took a few steps back, cupped her fist and bowed to Yu Ji and Yu Tan, and said, when we meet again in the future, Yu Yao will definitely try every possible way to kill both of you. The celestial technique of goddess Xian and heaven-breeding script of goddess Su are extremely powerful, and Yu Yao will never let Xiang Yu and Huang Xia have experts like my 2 younger sisters by their side. In the future, when my 2 younger sisters are schemed against by someone, please don't blame Yu Yao. Yu Ji casually put on her clothes and said with a chuckle, Yu Ji will not show any mercy to the 2 sisters. Once I have the chance, I'll personally dig out my sisters' hearts and make them into soup. Especially Sister Yu Yao's heart of 7 orifices, I've been drooling over it for a long time. Yu Tan, on the other hand, pulled out a long blade, mounted on the Black Panther, and rode away towards the south without saying a word. Yu Ji bowed gently to Yu Yao, then suddenly sprung forward like a ghost, reaching out her claw and grabbing towards Yu Yao's chest. A chuckle was heard, as Yu Yao's body suddenly shone with a dazzling golden light. 12 36 feet tall golden demon figurines appeared out of thin air, waving their fists and smashing them down towards Yu Ji's head. Yu Ji was taken aback. Hastily, she retreated and cried out sternly, Daqin is one of the 12 golden demon figurines of the kingdom. So, elder sister has met with Yingzheng in secret? You are indeed a treacherous and almost shameless elder sister. Abruptly, Yu Ji's body transformed into a clump of white light and vanished without a trace. Yu Yao stretched herself and stared blankly at the direction where Yu Ji and Yu Tan disappeared. The beloved concubine of the hegemon king of Western Chu, Yu Ji. The empress of Great Chu, Li Yuan. Oh, my dear sisters. She focused her eyes, and a ruthless and cruel smile emerged on the corner of her mouth. Somebody, send a scout to Great Yan's territory and spread the news that Yu Ji, the beloved concubine of the hegemon king of Western Chu, was raped by Wu Qi, Duke of Tianyun of Great Yan. Chapter 237. For the next 7 days, Wu Qi stayed in a secluded cultivation, focusing all his attention on absorbing the extremely pure innate energy that suddenly appeared in his body. It was extremely pure, even comparable to the clump of innate earth element energy essence that Wu Qi used to craft the earth element dragon scale shield. On top of that, it was extremely strong, almost as strong as the innate purple energy essence that could only be formed by an ordinary nascent divinity cultivator after several hundred years of arduous cultivation. It was as if someone had cultivated arduously for several thousand years, condensed a precious innate purple energy essence, which was used by nascent divinity cultivators to temper and strengthen their nascent divinity, and injected it into Wu Qi's body through some special method. When an ordinary Jin Dan cultivator encountered an innate energy essence of this level, he or she would not even be able to sense its existence. But to Wu Qi, it was like a hungry wolf that had just seen a piece of fresh meat, and could not wait to start absorbing and digesting it. Inside his 7 stealing heaven meridians, 10 bright false cores were absorbing the innate energy essence that nearly filled up Wu Qi's body with all their might. When the energy essence that contained an enormous amount of energy essence was absorbed by Wu Qi's false cores, it gradually formed into wisps of innate nectar that glinted with the color of white jade, and was as sticky as a jade paste. Nourished by the innate nectar, Wu Qi's false cores gradually solidified and hardened. From a hazy, shadowy shape, it quickly condensed into a real Jin Dan that was the size of a grain of rice, glinting with a golden luster. The innate nectar had saved Wu Qi from several hundred years of arduous cultivation. If he relied on devouring other people's Jin Dan and demon cores to purify the innate nectar, perhaps he would need at least 100,000 Jin Dan and demon cores to achieve the same result. While absorbing the innate energy essence, Wu Qi was pondering about its origin. Recently, he did not have any other fortuitous encounters, except for that one night with Yu Ji, which was the most unimaginable encounter he had in the past few days. He could still remember the wonderful enjoyment brought to him by Yu Ji's mesmerizing body. At the same time, in that almost dreamlike state, Wu Qi seemed to remember that Yu Ji was actually still a virgin. She's been with Xiang Yu for so many years. How can she still be a virgin? Wu Qi tried his best to stimulate his empty core to absorb this vital essence and condense the innate nectar. At the same time, he was surprised by his own discovery. Unless she has cultivated some special cultivation method over the years, and her body has been tempered by the heavenly thunder more than once, it's impossible for her to have such a miraculous change. But it was a pity that at that time, he was only focused on squeezing out Yu Ji's body with all his might, desperately enjoying the indescribable wonderful feeling, and did not have the time to use all kinds of mystic arts in scroll of stealing to peep at Yu Ji's body. Otherwise, he would definitely be able to find out if Yu Ji had cultivated some kind of special cultivation technique. However, this huge amount of pure innate qi could only be a gift from Yu Ji to Wu Qi. A night of pleasure could actually save Wu Qi several hundred years of effort in laying the foundation of Jin Dan realm. Wu Qi had really gained both a man and a fortune, a great fortune. However, if I am really an ordinary cultivator of Jin Dan realm, this innate qi can only stay in my body for at most 3 days before it completely dissipates. This strand of innate qi will only last for 3 days at most before it completely dissipates. At most, it can perform some minor adjustments and tempering on my body, but it can never achieve the effect it has now. While exercising his cultivation, Wu Qi was calculating the cause and effect of this incident. An ordinary human immortal of Jin Dan realm would never be able to discover the existence of this innate qi, and he would not have a suitable cultivation technique to absorb and harvest this innate qi, which would bring him the greatest benefit. An ordinary human immortal of Jin Dan realm would not be able to discover the existence of this innate qi, and he did not have a suitable cultivation technique to absorb and harvest this innate qi, which would bring him the greatest benefit. Wu Qi was a special case, as he was cultivating with an innate level cultivation technique. Therefore, he was able to make the best use of this innate qi. A few hundred years of effort in laying the foundation was indeed a great gift to him. It seems like that bitch never planned to let me benefit from this. Suddenly, Wu Qi came to a realization. With Wu Wang's experience and Lu Xiaobai's insane intelligence, Wu Qi had a vague feeling that Yu Ji had come to him with a trace of resentment towards Xiang Yu. It seemed like the couple had a quarrel, and Yu Ji had come to him at all costs, just to get back at Xiang Yu. Of course, there seemed to be some other reasons, but they were not the main ones. There was a conflict between Xiang Yu and Yu Ji. Wu Qi let out a heavy breath and sprayed out a stream of sword energy, shattering a few hassocks and a few short tables in the quiet room. Frowning, Wu Qi rose to his feet and slowly stopped the circulation of the cultivation technique in his body. The couple had a conflict, and in the end, Wu Qi was dragged into it. If it were some other woman, it would not be a big deal, as Wu Qi would not suffer any loss. But, Yu Ji was Xiang Yu's woman, the woman of Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu, who led 80,000 mighty soldiers of Xiang Yu and fought head-on with Ying Zheng. Xiang Yu already had a profound cultivation base, and he was accompanied by an ancient fiend, the banner of Qi Yu. Wu Qi did not think he could withstand Xiang Yu's astonishing fury. At least, he did not have the ability and power to fight against the astonishing power held in Xiang Yu's hands. But, that bitch Yu Ji wouldn't be so stupid as to tell Xiang Yu about this, would she? No matter how much Xiang Yu loves her, he will not accept a woman who takes the initiative to betray him, right? While he was calculating the impact this incident would have on him, and the possible threats it might pose to him in the future, all of a sudden, a vast wave of natural energies came surging towards him from all directions. Accompanied by a wild gust of wind, the room where he was cultivating in seclusion was pulled up into the sky, together with its foundation. A loud boom rang out, as Wu Qi felt his legs go limp. The ground around him was pulled up into the sky by the strong wind, and a huge pit, nearly 1,000 feet deep, was created under his feet. He glanced around in astonishment, then instinctively activated the earth element dragon scale shield to protect himself, while the chariot of 8 horses was ready to take action. Once something went wrong, the chariot would immediately bring him and flee at the fastest speed. A dense earthen yellow light enveloped Wu Qi's body, while several tens of thousands of golden dragon scales densely formed into a thick and heavy armor on Wu Qi's body, protecting him from the elements. Wu Qi looked around in astonishment, and saw many figures moving around him. They were palace guards clad in green outfits, and bear demons of Black Wind Hollow, who were clad in heavy armors. Standing in front of all palace guards and bear demons were Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin, holding a pair of large axes in their hands. They narrowed their tiny eyes and stared at Wu Qi. Xiong Jin shook his head and said, "Brother Wu Qi, you're in a big trouble." Tell me, to make Princess Zhang look so angry like that, what kind of crime have you committed? 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 Me. Wu Qi pointed his finger at his own nose, staring blankly at the palace guards and bear demons, and said in astonishment, "What have I done? What are you guys doing?" Before Xiong Jin could answer, Princess Zhang Li's shrill cry had already echoed out. A 5-colored divine ray swept across the sky, and with Meng Fortress as the center, a rainstorm suddenly fell across the entire Three Mountains province. Even though the weather in the vicinity of Meng Mountains was extremely harsh, the natives who had been living here for several hundred years had never seen such an exaggerated rainstorm. Raindrops the size of a fist fell down from the sky without any gap between them, producing deep, muffled noises as they hit the ground. The force of each raindrop was like a small cannonball, shattering the mountain rocks and collapsing all the buildings that had just been repaired in Meng Fortress. A strong gust of wind rolled the dark clouds and slowly descended from the sky. Amidst the dense cloud pillars, Princess Zhanglu was seen waving her arms and legs, staring fixedly at Wu Qi with her eyes wide open. The 5-colored divine ray behind her back was rolling and rocking, turning the natural energies within several thousand miles of circumference into a mess. Suddenly, to Wu Qi's surprise, Princess Zhang Li's cultivation base had actually risen to the middle stage of Jin Dan realm. How long had it been since she formed the Jin Dan realm? And yet, she had already reached the middle stage of Jin Dan realm. How did she actually cultivate? Wu Qi could still remember that not long ago, she still needed to do some homework every day between midnight and midnight to stabilize her cultivation base of Jin Dan realm. So, how did she suddenly reach the middle stage of Jin Dan realm? Before Wu Qi could figure out the question, Princess Zhanglu had already pointed her finger at Wu Qi and cried out, "Wu Qi, you bastard! You, with me here, how could you have the intention to touch another girl? You. Abruptly, the ever-changing yin and yang sumai spun out from behind Princess Zhanglu. He clapped the fan in his hand, pointed his finger at Wu Qi and snapped, "Wu Qi, you are the most shameless man under the heaven. How dare you rape the beloved concubine of Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu? You. Wu Qi was stunned. How did everyone under the heaven know about this? However, he also found it strange. Even if he had raped Xiang Yu's concubine, it would still make sense for Princess Zhang to be angry. After all, he and Zhang did share a little bit of friendship and some vague ambiguous feelings between them. But, what does that have to do with you, Su Mai? Leaping up into the air, Wu Qi came in front of Princess Zhang, stared at Su Mai coldly and scolded, "What does it have to do with you whether I raped another girl or not? I didn't rape your mother. Even if I did, it should be your father, Su Qin, who came looking for trouble with me. What does it have to do with you?" Su Mai was stunned. He pointed his finger at Wu Qi and stammered for a long time, but he could not say a single word. When a scholar met a soldier, it was impossible to reason with him, let alone Wu Qi, who was a combination of a soldier, a desperado, and a cultured scum. Although Su Mai was a resourceful man, when faced with a shameless man who refused to budge, how could he be a match for Wu Qi? Without giving Su Mai a chance to speak, Wu Qi gave him a slap on the face, sending him flying several thousand feet away with a great force. Wu Qi said coldly, I didn't rape that niece of yours. Why are you wasting your breath here?" Princess Zhang glared at Wu Qi with bloodshot eyes. She did not look like a resentful girl who was betrayed by her beloved, but more like a little kid whose favorite toy was snatched away. She pouted and yelled, "Wu Qi, you bastard! How could you rape that woman? Xiong Jin, Xiong Yin, capture Wu Qi, castrate him, and bring him into the palace to accompany me." Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin looked at each other, then laughed and answered at the same time. Xiong Jin rubbed his palms together and cried out in joy, "Your Highness, should we use a knife to cut him, or a hammer to smash him? Or, should we get a nest of metal-eating ants and eat this kid alive?" The rain poured down, and the world was covered in a vast expanse. Wu Qi stared deeply into Princess Zhang Li's bloodshot eyes, then suddenly pounced forward, wrapped his arms around Princess Zhang Li's slender waist, and planted a deep kiss on her lips. His tongue easily broke through the slight resistance of Princess Zhang, who was at a loss as to what to do, and quickly occupied a large part of her small mouth. After a skillful and lingering French kiss, Wu Qi moved closer to Princess Zhang Li's ear, and using the unique shameless spirit of Lu Xiaobai, he gently said, "Even when I was being raped by that woman, the one I was thinking about was you." Hundreds of powerful divine senses were observing the situation here. When these mighty cultivators heard what was almost the most shameless thing Wu Qi had ever said since the creation of the world, many of them slowly retracted their divine wills with a hint of bewilderment in them. When shamelessness was close to the Tao, the psychological impact it had on these cultivators was no less than a small-scale lightning tribulation. Princess Zhang had already softened in Wu Qi's arms. She stared blankly at Wu Qi and asked in a low voice, were you, by that shameless woman?" Wu Qi nodded his head and said, "I'm the victim. You're the only one I like. In my heart, the other women are no different from zombies." Princess Zhang smiled sweetly, hugged Wu Qi tightly, and laughed out loud. Chapter 238. Above Meng Fortress, Yan Dan and his company were seen standing on top of a dark cloud. Yan Qijuan looked down at Wu Qi, who was holding Princess Zhang in his arms. His face was unsightly. Any father would not be in a good mood when he saw his daughter being easily tricked by a glib-tongued young man. Especially when the rumor that Wu Qi had raped the beloved concubine of Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu, was spreading like wildfire in Great Yan dynasty. How could Yan Qijuan allow his most precious daughter to befriend such a man? Clenching his right fist tightly, Yan Qijuan suddenly raised it up and unleashed a sheet of pale golden thunderbolts, about to punch down. Before he could throw out his fist, a skinny palm had already gently gripped his fist. The thunderbolts on the fist vanished abruptly, as if they had never appeared before. Yan Qijuan turned his head furiously, about to scold the man who dared to stop him. But, he quickly retracted his angry face, bowed respectfully to the man and said, "Old Mr. Sun, may I know why you are stopping me?" Sun Kuang clasped his hands behind his back, looked at Yan Qijuan with a gentle smile, and said, "Why are you attacking Wu Qi?" Yan Qijuan remained silent for a brief moment, then said coldly, "This young man has an improper conduct. He raped Xiang Yu's beloved concubine, and he even flirted with Zi Xian with that obscene tone. How could I allow Zi Xian to befriend such a character? After killing him today, I will naturally select a talented young man from Great Yan Dynasty to marry Zi Xian, and make her a good marriage." Sun Kuang laughed, shook his head and said, "This is considered improper conduct? Crown Prince, you raped Princess Zhang Li's mother after you were drunk, and used an energy-seizing pill to force all her blood essence and the ancestral bloodline into Princess Zhang Li's body. You also took in several thousand concubines, and over the years, you have robbed several tens of thousands of girls of their chastity after you were drunk. Wu Qi only had one night of pleasure with a girl, but Crown Prince has so many women, and has done all those things. In comparison, doesn't that mean Crown Prince's conduct is no longer tolerated by the heaven and earth?" Yan Dan pursed his lips into a smile, while Mod, Su Qin, and the others smiled even more brilliantly. Yan Qijuan stared blankly at Sun Kuang and said dryly, "Qijuan is a monarch, he. Sun Kuang faintly said, "What monarch, minister, and minister? What's the difference between you and Wu Qi?" Honestly speaking, his temperament was much better than all the so-called talented young men of Great Yan Dynasty. At least, judging from his face, I can tell he had lost his virginity 7 days ago. As for those young and talented men of Great Yan Dynasty, can you find me a boy who is at least 10 years old? Mod also chuckled and said, "There's no need to talk about the so-called moral conduct." Yan Qijuan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just frowned and looked at Wu Qi. His eyes flickered, and no one knew what he was thinking. "All right," Yan Dan said coolly, "who does Zi Xian like? We don't need to intervene in this matter. Wu Qi is a pretty good kid. Both his innate talent and cultivation base are excellent, and he has formed the Golden Dan before the age of 18. His luck is top-notch. He is a good kid. As for that concubine of Xiang Yu's, no matter he raped her, or the concubine raped him, that's what happened." He snorted coldly. Yan Dan said sternly, "Find out who spread this rumor across the entire Great Yan Dynasty in just 7 days. Anyone who was suspicious would be arrested, tortured, and their families would be exterminated." Are they trying to provoke an all-out war between Great Yan and Great Chu? This must be Daqin's doing. Su Qin nodded his head slowly and said in a deep voice, "This seems to be the doing of my junior brother, but the method is somewhat different. If it were my junior brother's method, he would not be so stingy. And he would not expose this matter so soon. Instead, he would keep it in his hand quietly, waiting for the time when the value of this matter has reached the maximum before striking. This incident seems to be the doing of a woman." Yan Dan breathed out a long sigh and said, "No matter who is the one behind this, we need to prepare for Xiang Yu's reaction." Before his words could fade away, a shrill neighing of a horse was heard coming from the depth of Meng Mountains in the distance. A blinding blood-red beam shot up into the sky from 1,000 miles away, and in just a blink of an eye, it transformed into a vast and mighty blood energy, rushing towards the direction of Meng Fortress at an incredible speed. As it was a single man riding at top speed, none of the outposts along the way managed to intercept the blood-red beam. In just the time of a few breaths, the blood-red beam had traveled several hundred miles, and in just a blink of an eye, it had arrived at a place less than 300 miles away from Meng Fortress. Coincidentally, there was a mountain that was guarded by cultivators from Indestructible Sect. Led by 3 Earth Immortals of Nascent Soul Realm, several dozens of Gene Dan human immortals from Indestructible Sect let out a furious roar, "Halt!" as they rushed up and blocked the path of the blood-red beam. "Not good," cried Yan Dan in a low voice. Right after he finished his words, a miserable shriek was heard coming from afar. Amidst the blood-red beam, a long spear shaped like a black dragon was waving at top speed, transforming into numerous cold beams that wheeled in all directions. The several dozens of cultivators from Indestructible Sect, whose bodies were as tough as Vajras, were struck on the forehead, throat, and lower abdomen at the same time. 3 streams of blood as thick as an arm burst out from each of them, and they were knocked flying far away by a coiling dragon spear. The blood-red murderous aura rushed into the bodies of these cultivators, shattering their Jin Dan and nascent souls. The faces of Yen Dan and the others turned extremely gloomy. It was not a big deal to lose several dozens of Jin Dan human immortals. As long as they were willing to pay a great price, Indestructible Sect could even produce a large number of Jin Dan human immortals. However, those 3 Earth immortals were a very precious strategic force. Even for someone like Yen Dan, the loss of 3 Earth immortals of nascent soul realm had made his heart ache. Indestructible Sect paid more attention to the tempering of their fleshly body, and as a result, the ratio of them forming Jin Dan was very high. The number of Jin Dan human immortals in Indestructible Sect was almost equal to the total number of all the other sects in Great Yen. And because they paid too much attention to the tempering of their fleshly body, the cultivators of Indestructible Sect had a very poor ability to comprehend the Tao of heaven and earth. As a result, the Jin Dan human immortals of Indestructible Sect had a huge number of human immortals, but very few nascent soul cultivators. On the other hand, once those Earth immortals of Indestructible Sect formed their nascent souls and went through the tempering of heavenly thunder, their overall strength would be equal to the combined strength of 5 ordinary nascent soul cultivators of the same level. A cultivator with a strong fleshly body and a formidable offensive strength was the most precious main force on the battlefield. But now, 3 of them were killed by Xiang Yu amidst the blood-red light. It would be strange if Yen Dan did not feel his heart ache. Wu Qi, you punk. Wu Qi punk, get your ass out here right now. Amidst the blood-red light, Xiang Yu threw his head back and roared furiously, how dare you bully my woman? Get your ass out here right now. In just a blink of an eye, the blood-red light had arrived outside Meng Fortress. Xiang Yu casually thrust his spear and thrust it down towards the wall of Meng Fortress. A dragon-shaped blood-red light brought with it a towering killing intent, coiling up countless thunderbolts and dark thunderbolts, as it shot out with a jarring whistle and smashed viciously onto the wall. A large sheet of defensive mechanisms blinked and flickered, as all the defensive mechanisms of Meng Fortress were activated. The blood-red light slammed onto several dozens of layers of defensive mechanisms, breaking 35 of them in a row, causing the entire ground of Meng Fortress to shake violently. Finally, it exploded and shattered into pieces at the last layer of defensive mechanism. Countless thunderbolts struck down from the sky, vanquishing the dark clouds of thunderbolts coiled up by Princess Zhanglu. A large sheet of sunlight sprinkled down, shining on the blood-red light around Xiang Yu's body. The blood-red light flickered, and countless human figures could be vaguely seen amidst it. They were the baneful souls formed by the souls of those killed by Xiang Yu, who were sucked into the blood-red light. These baneful souls opened their mouths and let out soundless roars. A soundless but real spiritual impact swept across the surroundings, lifting up a thick layer of rock layers outside Meng Fortress. Large chunks of rock layers flew up into the sky, and were shattered into countless fragments by the spiritual impact. Wherever Xiang Yu passed by, mountains would break, rivers would dry up, and flowers, trees, insects, fishes, birds, and beasts would all turn into dead things. He was like an immortal fiend god who crawled out from the netherworld, bringing nothing but endless destruction and destruction. Long beams of blood-red light shot out from the eyes of the furious Xiang Yu, and from time to time, dense blood mist would creep in and out from his 7 apertures. He had completely lost his self-control, turning into a mad fiend. Wu Qi, you punk! Come out here and fight me to death! Xiang Yu roared fiercely, come out here and fight me to death! Since you have the courage to touch my woman, you should have the courage to let me stab you 108,000 times with my spear. Holding Princess Zhanglu in his arms, Wu Qi landed on the wall of Meng Fortress. From all directions, several tens of thousands of Great Yen Dynasty's cultivators flew up into the sky, injecting their energy into the core of the defensive mechanism of Meng Fortress. A blinding light burst out from the defensive formation meticulously constructed by the master craftsman from Mo sect. A strong barrier of light enveloped the entire city, and even a nascent divinity cultivator would find it difficult to break through the defense of Meng Fortress. Standing within the thick barrier of light, Wuqi did not worry about his own safety at all. Even if Xiang Yu was the reincarnation of a god of war, there was no way he could break through the defensive mechanism constructed by several tens of thousands of cultivators. Unless it was a real heaven immortal, or several dozens of nascent divinity experts attacking at the same time, the defensive mechanism of Meng Fortress would be unbreakable. Looking at the furious and deranged Xiang Yu on the outskirts of the city, Wuqi breathed out a long sigh and said, "Xiang Yu, who told you that I raped your woman?" Xiang Yu raised his spear and howled, "This has been spread across the entire Great Yan dynasty. Do you think I'm a deaf man?" Wuqi spread his arms, breathed out a long sigh and said, "It was your woman who seduced me and raped me. It was not me who took the initiative to flirt with her." Xiang Yu was so angry that blood sprayed out from his mouth. A vast murderous aura towered into the sky, and lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the sky, causing the ground to crack and crack into countless trenches. Xiang Yu bellowed furiously, "Bullshit! Bullshit! Yu Ji, she took the initiative to flirt with you? Yan Dan, if you are a real man, get the hell out here and tell me about this. Hand over Wuqi and let me stab him to death with my spear, or else, Great Chu and Great Yan will fight to the death." A beam of blood-red light shot up into the sky from the top of Xiang Yu's head, from which 18 giant undead warriors, each standing 10,000 feet tall, strode out while roaring furiously. 36 long arms were raised up high in the air, as these giant undead warriors exerted all their strength and smashed their heavy fists onto the defensive mechanism of Meng Fortress. 18 large mouths were opened wide, and a crimson flame poured down like a waterfall of the Yellow River, bringing with it a frightening temperature that could melt gold and iron. According to Lao AI, the strength of each of these 18 giant undead warriors was comparable to an early-stage nascent divinity cultivator. However, they did not have their own intelligence, and needed someone to control them. When the heavy fists smashed down, 36 small mushroom clouds soared up into the sky from the defensive mechanism. The defensive mechanism of Little Meng City trembled, and managed to block off the attacks of these undead warriors. However, the ground outside of Little Meng City could not withstand such a tremendous impact. A dozen mountain ridges cracked and cracked at the same time, and countless huge rocks were thrown up into the sky by the counterforce. 18 streams of crimson flame came whistling down from the sky, enveloping the entire Little Meng City completely. The scorching flame kept eroding the defensive mechanism, producing a large sheet of blinding light. The energy stones in the core of the defensive mechanism were consumed at an incredible speed. However, an attack like this was still not enough to break through the defensive mechanism of Meng Fortress. Wuqi looked at Xiang Yu, who was standing outside the city, and couldn't help but shake his head. After all, he did have a night of pleasure with Yu Ji, and there was nothing he could say about that. However, Princess Zhanglu suddenly stuck out her chest, pointed her finger at Xiang Yu and scolded, "Xiang Yu, you're such a shameless man. Your woman seduced my lover and raped Wuqi. I haven't settled the score with you yet, but you still have the nerve to come knocking on my door." Stomping her foot fiercely, Princess Zhanglu snapped, "Somebody, capture Xiang Yu alive, and ask his subordinates to bring that Yu Ji here to exchange for him." Tilting her head up proudly, Princess Zhanglu twitched her lips, sneered, and said, "I'd like to see what kind of face this shameless woman has. If she has a pretty face, she can be Wu Qi's concubine. I'm a very broad-minded person." Xiang Yu let out a furious roar, and at the same time, hot blood burst out from his 7 apertures. On the other side, Wu Qi turned to look at Princess Zhanglu in shock. Her words had given Wu Qi a great shock. Chapter 239. Stunned, Wu Qi stared blankly at Princess Zhanglu and asked in a low voice, "What are you talking about? I don't dare to provoke that Princess Yu." Princess Zhanglu raised her nose and said proudly, "You don't have to worry about this. You don't dare to provoke her, but I'm going to teach her a good lesson and make her understand some things. I'm in charge of all the affairs around you, and as your concubine, she has to listen to my instructions obediently. If she's obedient, I'll feed her with luxurious clothes and delicious food. If she's not obedient, I'll drag her out and beat her to death with a stick. But, Zixian, if you marry me, will you still help me choose concubines? Wu Qi asked in astonishment. Princess Xianglu looked at Wu Qi in astonishment, frowned and said, "Is that so strange? Every year, Grandpa Emperor takes in dozens of new concubines to give birth to offspring. Every year, Father also takes in nearly 100 new concubines. Even old Mr. Su Qin has brought back a few singing girls from the pleasure boat in Myriad Red River and made them his concubines. Su Mai is the son of old Mr. Su Qin's concubine 30 years ago." Looking at Wu Qi with a puzzled expression, Princess Xianglu said, "As a man of great Yan, it is my duty to bring in more offspring for the clan. Otherwise, how can a clan grow stronger? With your current status and identity, if you marry Zixian, out of all the palace maids serving Zixian, there should be 108 of them who will become your concubines at the same time. After that, every year, you will have to take in at least 12 new concubines as your concubines. Only by doing that, you will be able to expand the strength of Great Yan Dynasty." Princess Xianglu said with a serious expression, "Grandpa Emperor has been teaching us that in this world, the power of the clan is the most reliable. If we don't produce more offspring, how can we gain a foothold in this world?" Wu Qi fell silent. He couldn't tell what he was feeling, but he put his arms around Princess Xiangli's waist. Yes, he had neglected the reality of this world and applied the principles that he was accustomed to on Earth to Princess Xianglu. If they were on Earth, if a noble like Princess Xianglu were to marry someone, how could she tolerate her husband fooling around outside? Wouldn't that cause a great chaos in the world? But in this world, the domineering and ignorant Princess Xianglu was wholeheartedly thinking for the love of her life, even taking into consideration how many new concubines she was going to marry in the future. This world. Wu Qi thought to himself, if Xiao Bai could come here, I bet he would be so touched that he would burst into tears. This place is simply the paradise that he has been dreaming of. Standing on top of the wall, Princess Xianglu was calculating all these with her fingers, yet it had infuriated Xiang Yu down below. He thrust his coiling dragon spear into the air like a madman, and kept unleashing unreserved attacks towards Meng Fortress. He transformed into a clump of blood-red flame, slamming and slamming into the defensive barrier of Meng Fortress with a jarring noise of wind breaking. Again, and again. Every time he slammed into the barrier, he would not hold back, as he had fused all his spirit, energy, and soul into the coiling dragon spear in his hand. Every time he slammed into the barrier, it was as heavy as Mount Tai, but he failed to achieve anything. The defensive barrier of Meng Fortress was formed from several tens of thousands of cultivators of Great Yan Dynasty, an enormous amount of energy stones, dozens of underground energy veins, and an enormous amount of natural energy. How could Xiang Yu possibly break through it alone? Every time he slammed into the barrier, he would be bounced back by the barrier, and every time, he would be sent flying over 100 miles away. But, every time, Xiang Yu would roar furiously and thrust his spear forward, transforming into a blood-red beam and slamming back fiercely. He had fused all his willpower, all his strength, and all his spirit, energy, and soul into the spear in his hand. He thrust the spear forward, then thrust it forward again, and thrust it forward again. Loud popping noises rang out as his body slammed into the defensive barrier, causing the barrier to flicker and flicker violently, and causing numerous bloody wounds to gradually open up on his body, while a large amount of blood kept spraying out from them. Xiang Yu, who had nearly turned his nascent divinity into a flame, howled hoarsely, "Wu Qi, you little thief! Come out and fight me to death! Wu Qi, you little thief! Come out and fight me to death! Yen Dan, get your ass out here right now! If you don't hand over this little thief, Great Chu and Great Yen will fight to the death!" Clang! A loud clanging noise echoed out. Finally, the coiling dragon spear in Xiang Yu's hand could no longer withstand the crazy impact, and suddenly broke apart. The skin and flesh of Xiang Yu's hands were torn and torn by the explosion of the coiling dragon spear, exposing the pale white bones underneath with a faint golden gleam. After losing the spear, Xiang Yu's body slammed straight into the defensive barrier. Several hundred defensive thunderbolts, each as thick as a water bucket, came whistling down from the sky and smashed onto his body, smashing his armor and ripping it off. His body, which was already riddled with countless bloody wounds, was now covered with even more blood and flesh. It was a horrible sight to behold. Wu Qi hugged Princess Zhongli's waist tightly, fixing his eyes on Xiangyu, who was badly beaten by the defensive barrier. Yuji, why did you come to me for no reason? Are you trying to kill Xiangyu? On the other side, Princess Zhongli clapped her hands lightly and said with a joyful smile, "What a brainless fellow. If he is dead, then so be it. Now that he is dead, Grandpa can mobilize the army and wipe out all 80,000 elite soldiers of his. At the same time, we can get rid of a formidable enemy for Great Yen. Sigh, this consort can't wait to see exactly what that Yuji looks like." Wu Qi patted Princess Zhongli's head, sighed and said in a low voice, "This Xiangyu is also a hero. Don't provoke him with words anymore." Princess Zhongli twitched her lips, shook her head disdainfully and said, "Hero? I really can't tell how he looks like a hero. Impulsive, overconfident, and self-righteous. He is just like Xiong Qing and the other big bears. That woman actually raped you. She is obviously not a good woman." For the sake of a bad woman, he charged into the territory of the enemy alone to seek revenge. What a stupid man. Stupid. Wu Qi thought back to the hegemon king of Western Chu in the history, and he could not help but sigh. This hegemon king was indeed not that smart. With a loud cracking sound, Xiangyu's right fist smashed heavily on the defensive barrier of the city. Hundreds of huge runes flashed on the wall, and the tremendous force of the impact shattered the bones of Xiangyu's right arm. His right arm was twisted in an abnormal way, and it was obvious that the bones inside had turned into a mess. However, Xiangyu did not feel it at all. He kept swinging his limp arm and slammed it heavily onto the barrier in front of him. Princess Zhongli's face froze slightly. Xiangyu, who was covered in blood and looked like a crazy devil, was starting to scare her. Wu Qi frowned as well. He slightly exercised the mystic eyes of universe and glanced at Xiangyu. This was not normal, very abnormal. It was only natural that Xiangyu would want to vent his anger by killing him. But, he was so angry that he did not even notice that his body was injured. This was not just because he was angry, but something else must have happened to him. Using the mystic eyes of universe, Wu Qi could vaguely see a tall and burly celestial fiend hovering behind Xiangyu. Countless tiny threads of light were being emitted from the blood-red celestial fiend, piercing deep into Xiangyu's body. Streams of blood-red spiritual attacks, which Wu Qi could barely see, were attacking Xiangyu's nascent divinity, which was on the verge of collapsing in his spiritual ocean. There was not a single drop of blood left in Xiangyu's body, as all his blood had been transformed into a sticky blood-red flame and burned away. It was causing his body to go through some bizarre transformation, which was very similar to the transformation that happened to Wu Qi when he was cultivating the dragon transformation script. In Wu Qi's mystic eyes of universe, as the blood-red flame burned Xiangyu's body, his bones were gradually transforming into a translucent blood-red crystal, while his muscles and meridians were turning into an evil and demonic purple-black color. A huge blood-red cloud wrapped around a blood-red flag was rolling rapidly inside Xiangyu's body, accelerating the overall transformation of his fleshly body. Devilization. Xiangyu's body was quickly transforming into a fiend. There were several tens of thousands of rare and precious spirit items recorded in the Scroll of Stealing, and one of them was called the Thousand Tribulation Dragon Blood Fiend Fruit, which had the effect of transforming the body of a cultivator into the body of an ancient celestial fiend. Once the cultivator transformed into the body of an ancient celestial fiend, no blade or axe could hurt him. Even if it was only a small piece of broken body, as long as there was still a thread of broken soul left, the cultivator would be able to absorb the natural energies and be reborn. Indestructible and immortal celestial fiend body, this was the strongest effect of the body of an ancient celestial fiend. Xiangyu's body was gradually going through this bizarre transformation. But obviously, this transformation was not under his control. It was as if his body was being possessed by someone. While his fleshly body was undergoing the transformation, his nascent divinity was also being attacked violently. The blood-red celestial fiend behind him seemed to be seizing the control of his body. What kind of damned cultivation technique is this guy cultivating? How could he cultivate a second nascent divinity in his body that can devour the owner's second nascent divinity? Wu Qi shook his head and murmured in confusion. However, he just murmured to himself, as he was too lazy to find out what was going on. Suddenly, a beam of starlight shot up into the sky from the top of his head. It was the heavenly star positioning disc, the most precious treasure of heavenly spirit sect, flying up slowly from the top of Wu Qi's head. Zi Xian, Xiong Jin, Xiong Yin, Xiong Qing, all of you, lend me a hand. Wu Qi pointed at the ancient jade disc that was spinning slowly above his head, smiled wryly and said, "This thing has a great offensive strength, but it consumes a lot of energy as well. With your energy, let me see if I can give Xiang Yu a good beating." Princess Zhanglu stared at the heavenly star positioning disc in surprise. She smiled and said, "It is true that you killed the people of Heavenly Spirit sect and robbed their most precious treasure. Hee, this treasure is mine now, and no one can take it back and give it back to those bastards from Heavenly Spirit sect. I, Bai Zhuer, quickly remember that there is a heavenly star positioning disc in my private storage. If it goes missing in the future, find Heavenly Spirit sect and give it a hard time. They must be the ones who stole it." Beaming with joy, Princess Zhanglu flipped her palm and sent a stream of pure energy into the heavenly star positioning disc. The Xiong brothers, Xiong Qing brothers, and the rest of the demon bears were roaring and sending their energy into the heavenly star positioning disc. Suddenly, the enormous heavenly star positioning disc shone with a layer of several tens of feet thick silver starlight. Amidst a deep rumble of thunder, the jade disc began to spin quickly. With his divine will, Wu Qi controlled the heavenly star positioning disc, slowly guiding the energy of Princess Zhanglu and the others into the restrictive spell in the disc. Both of his hands were quickly forming incantation gestures, controlling the specks of starlight that suddenly appeared on the disc, locking Xiang Yu's body tightly. There was a group of cultivators from Heavenly Spirit sect who were helping to defend the Meng fortress. When they saw Wu Qi suddenly taking out the most precious treasure of their sect, they cried out in alarm. These cultivators from Heavenly Spirit sect were staring at Wu Qi with an unfriendly gaze. All the grudges between him and Heavenly Spirit sect suddenly emerged in their minds. Wu Qi did not have the time to pay any attention to these people from Heavenly Spirit sect. He pointed his finger out casually. A silver beam as thick as a water tank shot out from the heavenly star positioning disc and hit Xiang Yu's chest. Xiang Yu gave a miserable howl as he was knocked flying away by the silver beam. Chapter 240. The silver beam brought Xiang Yu's body and pierced through over 30 lofty mountains, leaving behind several tens of feet wide holes on top of them. It continued until Xiang Yu was over 100 miles away, and only then did the silver beam gradually dissipate. The skin and flesh of Xiang Yu's upper body had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a translucent skeleton that had turned pale black, and some remaining internal organs, blood vessels, and meridians. The starlight shot out from the heavenly star positioning disc was rubbing against the air at a high speed, triggering a great amount of heat. Xiang Yu's skeleton was boiling hot, and white smoke kept rising and rising from it. All the skin and flesh on his head, including both of his eyeballs, had turned into nothingness because of the high temperature. The pale black skull stared fixedly at the direction of Meng Fortress, then suddenly opened its mouth and let out a soundless roar that rang out directly in the souls of all the people. The furious roar immediately made over 10,000 cultivators with the weakest cultivation base in Meng Fortress fall to the ground while coughing blood. Their souls had suffered a great impact, and a few of them even had their 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls shaken out of their bodies, nearly being wiped out by the sunlight and the strong wind. Suddenly, countless tiny blood vessels grew out from Xiang Yu's pale black skeleton. The densely packed blood vessels were twisting and struggling, quickly reconstructing his internal organs and muscles. Amidst a series of sizzling noises, thick layers of muscles quickly covered Xiang Yu's skeleton, while his meridians and blood vessels were gradually spreading out from his muscles. His newly regenerated muscles, blood vessels, and meridians were now glinting with a dark purple gleam, glinting with a metallic gleam. The natural energies within the circumference of 1,000 miles began to surge and roll towards Xiang Yu, while his body was like a black hole that kept devouring an enormous amount of natural energies. At the same time, Xiang Yu's body was transforming the natural energies at an incredible speed, forming new blood, flesh, and internal organs. His newly regenerated heart was pounding vigorously like a war drum, shaking the surrounding air and producing loud banging noises, while the ground was shaking violently along with his heartbeat. On top of the city wall, Wuqi gasped, then grinned and said, "Is he still a human?" Princess Xianglu stared in astonishment at Xiang Yu, whose body was transforming like a ghost about 100 miles away. A five-colored divine ray burst out from her back, as she pointed both of her hands at Xiang Yu and cried out, "All living beings under the heaven, follow my will." Deification. Soul-locking curse. Following Princess Zhongli's rebuke, a power similar to the power of laws spread out from her body, giving Wuqi, who was standing beside her, a fright. He looked at Princess Zhonglu with astonishment. His soul consciousness quickly covered her body, sensing the strange energy fluctuations emitted from her body. It was a very mysterious power that pointed directly to the rules of heaven and earth. It was similar to Li Si's Dharma word and Su Fu's primordial runes Dao. However, it was closer to the original power of this world, a more primitive and ancient power. This kind of power made Wuqi frown, as it was very similar to the power of the primordial runes recorded in the Book of Ancient God, which he found in the Scroll of Stealing. Ancient, primordial, filled with an awe-inspiring aura that no one dared to offend. It was a pity that Princess Zhongli's cultivation was too weak. She was unable to unleash the true might of this power, but it was already frightening enough. Near the center of Princess Zhongli's brows, there was a faint spirit light that was faintly visible. If not for Wuqi's mystic eyes of universe, which allowed him to see things that ordinary cultivators could not, he would not have been able to discover the existence of this spirit light. Through this spirit light, the energy of Princess Zhongli's divine sense was transformed into the strange power, quickly spreading to an area of 100 miles in circumference. The surrounding heaven and earth suddenly fell into a dead silence. Like a bug trapped in amber, everything within an area of 300 miles was completely frozen by a strange power. Time, space, the circulation of natural energies, the movement of all people, the vibration of all the tiny particles, everything seemed to have paused for a brief moment. At that moment, even Wuqi's divine sense went blank, as he could not understand what was happening. Princess Zhonglu performed an incantation gesture with her slender fingers, pointed at Xiang Yu and said feebly, "Go." The strange power that covered an area of 300 miles suddenly compressed inwardly, condensing into a sesame-sized speck of light on the tip of Princess Zhongli's finger, flashing with a five-colored divine light. As Princess Zhonglu let out a soft cry, the tiny speck of light transformed into a beam of light, pierced through the void of 100 miles in a blink of an eye, and lightly imprinted itself on Xiang Yu's forehead. Suddenly, Xiang Yu's body, which was crazily devouring natural energies, froze. The connection between his body and the outside world was completely sealed. No matter how his muscles kept squirming, his heart was beating crazily, and the vague shadow of a blood-red fiend behind him kept roaring and leaping. He could not absorb any more natural energies. His body, which had just been mostly repaired, froze again. His purplish-black muscles were squirming crazily, but no new muscles were growing. Wah, so tired. Princess Zhonglu, who had unleashed her mighty power and sealed off the connection between Xiang Yu and the natural energies in the outside world with a magical sealing technique, had her body slanted to one side. Cold sweat was breaking out from her body like tiny streams, and in just a blink of an eye, her palace dress was soaked through. Princess Zhonglu rolled her eyes, made a few gurgling noises, and fell to the ground on her back. Wuqi quickly held Princess Zhonglu and placed his palms on her back. A large amount of pure energy kept rushing out of his palms and into Princess Zhongli's body. It was easy for Wu Qi to obtain his blood essence and energy. Therefore, he never attached much importance to these blood essence and energy, which were considered as precious as their lives by other cultivators. He circulated his energy and blood, constantly supplying his own blood essence and energy to Princess Xianglu. Princess Xianglu, whose face was so pale that it looked almost translucent, breathed a heavy sigh of relief, and her face suddenly regained its rosy color. Looking at Wu Qi with surprise, Princess Xianglu said happily, "I knew it, Wu Qi, you're the one who loves Xianglu the most and loves Xianglu the most. Under the heaven, you're the only one who would give Xianglu your own blood essence like this." Her face suddenly blushed, and Princess Xianglu said bashfully in a low voice, "I think I'd better not waste my blood essence and energy. It's not good for a man's body. If he loses his energy essence, he won't be able to give birth to a baby in the future." Wu Qi's heart raced a few times, and he nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Princess Xianglu helplessly. What was she thinking? What kind of family education did the princesses of Great Yan Dynasty receive? Although they knew nothing about the ways of the world, yet they were able to find concubines and concubines for their husbands. Before they were married, they were already concerned about the body of their lover, fearing that they wouldn't be able to give birth to a baby in the future. Wu Qi's face twisted. With a bitter smile on his face, he said, "Don't worry, I have a lot of blood essence of dragon essence, which can replenish my energy. The mystic technique you used just now has consumed too much of your energy, and it's time for you to replenish it." How did you learn the spirit locking spell? Ugh. Princess Xianglu stared at Wu Qi with a blank expression. She tilted her head, frowned and said, "Nobody taught me. This is strange, how did I learn it? It seems like I've learned it since I was young, but I can only use it after I formed the Jin Dan. There are many other spells, but I can't use them." A term suddenly emerged in Wu Qi's mind, bloodline inheritance. It was a bloodline inheritance power that could only be found in some extremely powerful divine beasts or immortal beasts. He had never thought that Princess Xianglu could inherit such an unimaginable mystic technique from her bloodline. Perhaps, this was the divine ability inherited from her mother's bloodline? Judging from the looks of Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan, it did not look like they had inherited any divine ability from their bloodline. Was Xiang Yu's body conferred as a deity? When hit by the spirit-locking spell, not only could he not absorb any natural energy from the outside world, even his mobility was temporarily sealed. His muscles were twitching violently like a tightened steel wire, producing loud cracking noises. However, no matter how hard he struggled, it was as if his body had lost the ability to move. Xiang Yu threw his head back and let out a furious roar. Blood-red beams shot out from his eyes, reaching a distance of a few miles. He glared angrily at Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu, who were cuddling and flirting with each other on top of the city wall, and roared, "Wu Qi, you little punk! Fight me to the death! Wu Qi, you little punk, you and I!" Puff! Xiang Yu, who had flown into a rage and did not pay any attention to what was happening around him, suddenly shot out a pink sword beam from his chest. The sword pierced through his heart, causing a large amount of burning blood to spray out from his chest like lava, then shot out hundreds of feet away along with the pink sword beam that carried a boundlessly charming aura. After that, 6 white shadows came striking down from the sky like thunderbolts, smashing heavily onto Xiang Yu's body and cracking his bones one after another, producing ear-splitting cracking noises. With his good eyesight, Wu Qi could see that the 6 white shadows were actually 6 foxtails, each about 7 to 8 miles long and covered in white fur. He could not see the actual body of the foxtails, only the 6 white tails kept smashing at Xiang Yu, making him howl and howl miserably, yet he did not even have the strength to fight back. Not allowing Xiang Yu to break free from the deification spell. Under the restraint of the spirit-locking spell, a huge black palm suddenly appeared above his head. A loud rumble rang out. The rock layer under Xiang Yu's feet, about a mile in circumference, was lifted up by the same giant black palm. Then, the 2 giant palms slammed inwards, turning the rock layer, which was about 1,000 feet thick, into nothingness. Xiang Yu's bones were broken in an instant. Then, the two huge palms were tossed towards Xiang Yu. A white shadow flashed across the sky, and a strange-shaped pair of scissors pierced through Xiang Yu's chest, shattering a row of his ribs. A heart the size of a toddler's head was cut off by the pair of scissors, accompanied by a large amount of blood. Then, it was taken out of Xiang Yu's body by the white light. Suddenly, a beam of strong golden light emerged, as the demon king Jin Jia, whose body had expanded to 30 feet tall, appeared behind Xiang Yu. His body was densely covered with golden scales, and he was holding a square golden hammer that looked like a heavy hammer used by blacksmiths. He let out a long and sonorous cry, swinging the hammer like a whirlwind and smashing it towards Xiang Yu's face. Clang! 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 A series of loud clanging noises rang out. Dark purple blood and flesh splattered everywhere from Xiang Yu's body, and more than half of his black bones were broken. Finally, a shrill cry rang out, as a greenish aura of death came shooting down from the sky and enveloped Xiang Yu entirely. A fat, pitch-black bald owl was seen hovering in midair. Its body was fully covered in black feathers, and there was not even a single hair growing on its buttocks, exposing more than half of its white buttocks. It opened its mouth and let out a hoarse cry, spraying out a huge amount of rotting bones and soul-devouring energy, crazily corroding Xiang Yu's corporeal body. The 5 imperial advisors of Great Yan Dynasty and the 5 demon kings of Meng Mountains had joined forces and severely wounded Xiang Yu on the spot. From afar, Wu Qi looked at Xiang Yu, who was enveloped by the soul-devouring energy, and breathed out a heavy sigh. You deserve to die, don't you? Princess Zhanglu assumed the posture of the first wife and said with a serious expression, "It's better that you're dead. I want to see if that Yu Ji is still beautiful, and if she is a good match for you. If she is beautiful, I'll take her as my wife." Not only Princess Zhanglu had the same thought, even Bai Zhu and Bai Zhu who stood next to her, were nodding their heads in agreement. Immediately, cold sweat broke out from Wu Qi's forehead. Chapter 241. Deep in Meng Mountains, on a small hill surrounded by green water, Ying Zheng and Gigazi were playing chess under a big tree. Black and white chess pieces were placed on the chessboard. Ying Zheng was playing black, and his chess moves were awe-inspiring. Vaguely, he was emanating a domineering aura, and every time he placed a chess piece, he would attack the spot where the opponent had no choice but to save. His killing intent was fully exposed from the black chess pieces. Gigazi was playing white, but his chess moves were indescribable. Sometimes it was erratic, sometimes it was filled with murderous intent, sometimes it was profound and simple, and sometimes it was simple and naive. His chess moves even gave one a feeling of disorder. But, amidst these random attacks, Ying Zheng's domineering chess strategy was twisted into a mess and out of order. Shaking his head with a slight headache, Ying Zheng shamelessly smashed the black and white chess pieces on the chessboard. He laughed dryly and said, "Old mister, you have an unfathomable ability, and you know the secrets of the heaven. I'm just a mortal, and I can't be compared with a deity." Gigazi picked up a cup of tea placed on the side of the chessboard, sipped it, then shook his head, sighed and said, "Emperor Qin is indeed Emperor Qin. His ability to flatter people is just a little weaker than others. I dare not call myself a deity, but under the heaven, there are only 2 people in Great Yan who can fight against me." Ying Zheng's face turned stiff. "Mod, Sun Kuang. Can they be used by Daqin?" Gigazi gave Ying Zheng a surprised look. Ying Zheng blushed, bowed his head and admitted his mistake, "I was wrong. Mod, the ancestor of Mo clan, and Sun Kuang, the widely acknowledged sage under the heaven. Since they have acknowledged me as their master, naturally, I can't use them. What a pity, why are they not in the territory of Daqin? Yen Dan has taken advantage of this." He sighed, then frowned and said, "So, with both of them holding you back, I'm afraid you can't act rashly, old mister." Gigazi nodded and said, "Yes. Mod, Sun Kuang, and I have come to an agreement. Unless we are facing someone else, when Daqin and Great Yan are fighting, we will not fight each other. Mod and Sun Kuang's cultivation base is not weaker than mine. Mod is an expert in mechanisms, while Sun Kuang is an expert in spells. Although I'm an expert in the Tao of formations and runes, the two of them are still stronger than me. Instead of wasting our energy, why don't the three of us stop? Ying Zheng nodded slowly, then turned to look at Yu Yao, who was brewing tea with a sweet smile on her face. A gentle smile emerged on Ying Zheng's stiff face as he said, "Sister, why do you need to do these trivial things yourself?" Yu Yao smiled faintly and poured a new cup of tea for Ying Zheng and Gigazi. After that, she raised her sleeve and wiped off the beads of sweat on her forehead. We haven't seen each other for over 2,000 years, and I really have no idea how you managed to survive all alone. How can I be at ease leaving these matters to others? The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Unconsciously, their hands clasped together. Yu Yao fell into Ying Zheng's arms. Both of them looked at each other affectionately, and for a moment, they forgot about everything under the heaven. Standing next to them, Gigazi shook his head, picked up the teacup and took a sip slowly. Then, he rose to his feet and looked into the southeast direction of the mountain range. The Empress has struck right at Xiang Yu's weak point. Perhaps, the furious Xiang Yu has already found his way to Great Yan's army. This is the perfect opportunity for Daqin to destroy the mighty army of Xiang Yu. We must wipe them all out, and not let a single one of them escape. A cold gleam flickered in the eyes of Ying Zheng and Yu Yao, and the warm feeling between them vanished in an instant. Ying Zheng rose to his feet, looked coldly into the direction of the mountain range, and said coldly, "I suppose the few generals have already struck, haven't they? Xiang Yu has left the army and gone out on his own. How can a man like him claim to be a hegemon? Among all the heroes under the heaven, how can a boorish man like him have the chance?" Yu Yao said coolly, "Since Xiang Yu has left the camp alone, let's go to the battlefield and take charge." Although Xiang Yu has left the army, the few generals under him are not so easy to deal with. Yu Yao has abandoned the over 2,000 years of sisterhood with Yu Ji, and used such a trick on Xiang Yu. Since she has done it, we can't spare a single soldier of Xiang Yu's army. The three men laughed together, then turned into bright beams and shot towards the direction of the mountain range. Vaguely, they heard Gigazi ask in a low voice, "But, there is one thing that I don't understand. I've studied the heaven's secrets, and I have some understanding of the Tao of heaven and earth. But, I can't understand why Yu Ji, as Xiang Yu's beloved concubine, would do such a thing with that little boy. It doesn't make any sense." Yu Yao's chuckle came from afar, "Old mister, you are a knowledgeable man. In your eyes, the Tao of heaven and earth is like reading the lines on your palm, and there is nothing you cannot understand. But, old mister, you do not understand women at all. The changes in the mind of a woman are millions and millions of times more complicated than the Tao of heaven and earth." Gigazi's desire to learn was aroused, and he asked hastily, "I'd like to hear the details." 3 bright beams sped away, flying towards a lofty mountain range that was shrouded in mist and clouds in the southeast direction. Between the towering mountain ridges, the dense forest had been completely cut down. Tens of thousands of practitioners of Qin army, clad in black robes and tall hats, were hovering in midair. Each of them was surrounded by 1 to 9 layers of glowing runes, each of them surrounded by blinking runes. The forest, measuring 100 miles in both width and length, was completely cut down, and a huge formation, measuring 100 miles in circumference, was drawn on the ground. Several tens of thousands of pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold of different sizes were glinting with a blinding light, as they were inlaid on various key parts of the formation. From time to time, bright lights would flash and flash from the formation, as large groups of burly men, clad in black armors and holding long blades in their hands, their eyes gleaming fiercely, strode out from the formation. Although the spatial breaching spirit gold could greatly reduce the consumption of energy stones, it was obvious that the territory of Daqin was too far away from Meng Mountains. However, it was obvious that the territory of Daqin was too far away from Meng Mountains, and the number of people needed to be teleported was too great. Every time the formation flickered, more than 100,000 burly armored soldiers would walk out from the formation. Every time the formation was teleported, the energy of all the energy stones in the formation would be completely depleted. Therefore, all the practitioners kept themselves busy. Once the energy of the energy stones was depleted, they would immediately replace it with another batch of energy stones. In just 15 minutes, the number of upper-grade and middle-grade energy stones had exceeded 5 million. Such a huge consumption of energy stones made Li Si and Su Fu, who were standing on top of clouds and supervising the operation, turn pale. When another batch of armored soldiers walked out from the formation, Li Si, whose face was twisted, could not help but turn his head and look at a handsome man standing next to him, clad in a long robe of a civil official with a heavy armor underneath. He said, "General Zhang, it should be about time, right?" During these 7 days, the number of condemned prisoners, felons, ruffians, and scoundrels who were transferred here from Daqin's territory has exceeded 5 million. Standing next to him, Su Fu also chimed in, "Su Fu, do not know much about military formations, but I do know that when there are more than 10,000 soldiers, there will be no end. If these 5 million condemned prisoners, felons, ruffians, and scoundrels are to spread out in this mountain ridge, they will occupy an area of several hundred miles in circumference. General Zhang, there is no way to spread out this army." The handsome man smiled, shook his head and said, "Don't worry. Once they are smashed into meat paste by the mighty army of Xiang Chu, they will be able to spread out. If these people stay in Daqin's territory, even if they are forced to serve as laborers, it will just be a waste of rice and food. It is better to kill them all at once, and at the same time, they can make a contribution to Daqin. The 80,000 mighty soldiers of Xiang Chu are all human immortals of Jin Dan. The 80,000 demon beasts pulling the chariots are all demon immortals who have formed their demon cores. Wiping out these 80,000 elite soldiers will be a heavy blow to Great Chu. In the future, Great Chu will be the strongest enemy of Daqin. If we can weaken them, we will." With just a few words, he had decided the fate of these 5 million condemned prisoners and felons. There was no killing intent in the words of this handsome man. It was as if he was an uncle from next door who was chatting idly with his family. Yet, it made one shudder with fear, and made one want to stay as far away from him as possible. On top of a mountain not far away, Baiqi and a few generals of Qin army were squatting on the ground, tossing dice in boredom. However, the dice they tossed were not engraved with the usual numbers. Instead, they were engraved with some tiny words, such as "focus on the east, take the initiative to attack the west, guard the rear army, lead the army in guerrilla warfare," and others. After tossing a few dice, Wang Jian suddenly rose to his feet angrily. He stared at the black-clothed man in the distance and said with a cold grin, "Zhang Han, you little punk. This is the same old trick he used many years ago, using the condemned prisoners and felons to put their lives on the line. What does this mean to the elite soldiers of Daqin?" Squatting on the ground, Baiqi picked up a handful of dice and tossed them randomly. All right, he said coolly, "it is a good thing that fewer elite soldiers will die. Let Zhang Han lead those bastards who are worse than pigs and dogs, and consume some of the strength of these mighty Chu soldiers. Once these 5 million lowly bastards are all dead, we'll lead our elite soldiers and attack. We'll definitely kill all 80,000 elite soldiers of Chu." Stretching his back, Baiqi sneered and said, "What a pity. For the sake of a woman, that idiot Xiang Yu actually challenged the front line of Yan army alone. What an idiot. A woman is nothing to him." He rose to his feet and stomped his feet forcefully. Baiqi shook his head and said, "A woman? I have several tens of thousands of concubines in my mansion, and yet, for the sake of a woman, he dares to charge into the front line alone. Can he be considered as a hegemon? What an idiot." All the generals of Qin army roared with laughter at the same time. Only Wang Jian was looking thoughtfully at the southeast direction. He murmured under his breath, "Xiang Yu is an idiot. Perhaps. But, he does have quite a number of strategists and excellent generals around him." Mr. Giguzi had learned that we were in danger in Meng Mountains through the art of turtle divination, and he had brought a great amount of energy stones and formation items to come to our rescue. That was why he had allowed us to construct the teleportation formation and keep receiving reinforcements from Daqin's territory. Great Chu places great importance on the art of shaman and ghost divination. I don't think they don't have any experts like that, right? Everyone frowned. Bai Qitian suddenly laughed and said, "Could it be that General Wang Li is still thinking about how you were captured alive by Xiang Yu years ago?" Wang Li's face turned extremely unsightly, while Wang Jian and Wang Ben snorted at the same time. Chuckling, Bai Qi moved his body sideways and stood in front of Bai Qitian. All the other generals of Qin army moved their bodies at the same time, and in an instant, they were divided into 3 distinct groups. They were led by Bai Qi, Wang Jian, and another general, who had a gaunt face, sunken eyes, and a tall nose. While the 3 groups of Qin generals were glaring at each other furiously, and were about to argue with each other, Zhang Han suddenly gave out an order from afar. A loud roar that sounded like a muffled thunderclap echoed out from the ground. From the surrounding mountain ridges, countless soldiers clad in black armors roared and roared, holding all kinds of weapons in their hands and charging towards the southeast direction without any formation. It was as if a group of evil ghosts had rushed out from hell, or as if a swarm of locusts had blotted the sky and covered the earth. In just a blink of an eye, several million armored soldiers had turned the mountain ridges several hundred miles in circumference black. While howling and howling, they charged forward at top speed while emanating a towering murderous aura. Up in the sky, Zhang Han was leading several hundred captains, shouting at the top of his voice, "Those who killed 1 Xiang Chu soldier will be absolved of their crime. Those who killed 2 Xiang Chu soldiers will be conferred a title of nobility. Those who killed 3 Xiang Chu soldiers will have their families conferred a title of nobility. Those who killed one of the generals of Xiang Chu soldiers will be conferred a title of nobility. Their land will be ceded, and they will be rewarded with 1 million gold coins and 1,000 beautiful girls." Zhang Han raised both hands up into the air and roared fiercely, "You are lowly bastards who are worse than pigs and dogs. You are a dead breed who are struggling for your lives in slavery. If you want to become someone superior, if you want to enjoy wealth and glory, this is your best chance. Gold, silver, jewelry, and beautiful girls are all waiting for you to enjoy. Kill, kill, kill. Ha ha ha." Millions of Daqin felons and condemned prisoners roared and roared at the same time. Suddenly, a strong blood-red gleam burst out from their eyes. Chapter 242. Amidst the mountain ridges, 80,000 elite soldiers of Xiang clan were building a city on a flat dam that measured nearly 1,000 miles in circumference. Some of the soldiers were exercising, some were cultivating, and some were bringing the single-horned rhinoceros demon beasts that pulled the chariots, washing these powerful rhinoceros demon beasts by a small river in the dam. The mighty soldiers of Xiang clan dug the soil and built the city. The city measured 30 miles in circumference, and there was a very tall watchtower in the middle of the city, which was also built using soil and stone. On the watchtower, which stood 1,500 feet tall and measured 20 feet in both width and length, 2 generals, Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang, were seen standing angrily on the watchtower, their eyes staring straight into the distance. Their eyes were dull and unfocused, and no one could tell what they were thinking about. After a full 15 minutes, Xiang Ta asked in a low voice, "Second father is not here. What should we do?" Xiang Zhuang gave Xiang Ta a fierce glare, then scolded in a low voice, "I only know how to kill people. Don't ask me about things that require brains. Second father is not here, but didn't we send a letter? But, all the women under the heaven are unreliable. The one who angered the king and left the camp alone when she just came back, and the 2 who brought the men here, they are all unreliable. Bah, if a bunch of women were to come together, we would all die here." Xiang Ta was shocked and said, "I don't think so. You and I are cultivating the Qiyu Undying Fiend technique, and the celestial fiend energy in all 360 acupoints has condensed into fiend energy pearls. Our overall strength is comparable to a cultivator who has formed his nascent divinity. It is not so easy for them to kill us. Xiang Zhuang spat a mouthful of phlegm onto the ground and growled impatiently in a low voice, so what if he's powerful? Where is the king? The king is gone. Without the king, the morale and combat strength of the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan will drop by at least 50%. Without the banner of Qiyu, our undying fiend technique that has yet to attain mastery can only bring out 30% of its fiend energy. You and I are only comparable to a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator. What's the point of fighting? While both of them were discussing, Yu Ji, who was clad in a black robe, Yu Tan, who was clad in a snow-white robe, and two other women, who were clad in palace dresses, had green hair that fluttered like clouds, and had exquisite and beautiful facial features. They were exuding a strong aura of nature, making them look like wild spirits of the mountains. Both Yu Ji and Yu Tan were dressed very simply, but the palace dresses worn by the two ladies were extremely luxurious. Their black palace dresses were fully embroidered with various beautiful patterns, and they were adorned with several dozens of exquisite jade pendants, and other ornaments. These jade pendants and jade discs were faintly glowing, and there were runes circulating within them. It was clear that they were extremely powerful magic tools, and not just decorative items. The two women's eyes were a magnificent dark green and deep purple, and their lips were a faint dark red. Their beautiful appearances gave off an extremely bewitching and gorgeous feeling. They were followed by several dozens of ladies, all wearing tall crowns on their heads and black robes. The exposed skin on their faces and hands was densely covered with black tattoos. Those tattoos were not ordinary venomous insects or fierce beasts, but tiny and dense ancient runes. They looked like countless worms that were wriggling and crawling under the fair skin of these ladies, as if they were living creatures. Upon seeing this group of ladies walk out, Xiang Zhuang's expression flickered. He spat out a mouthful of saliva and was about to spit it towards the heads of these ladies. Fortunately, Xiang Ta was fast enough to grab Xiang Zhuang and push him a few steps back. Pooh! Xiang Zhuang spat his saliva onto the watchtower, shaking it so much that a few cracks appeared on the soil and rocks on the platform. Although Xiang Ta had stopped him from spitting, Xiang Zhuang still struggled relentlessly, cursing at Yu Ji, Yu Tan, and the other ladies. Wicked girls, you are the source of this so-called calamity. Damn it! You are going to let all 80,000 of our men die here. A bunch of bastards. You can only be played by men in bed, how can you be the one commanding the army? Yu Ji and Yu Tan smiled with a straight face, while the two ladies clad in palace dresses frowned slightly and sighed lightly. One of them raised her right hand and showed him a commander's seal carved into the shape of a tiger. General Xiang Zhuang, here is the commander's seal. If you refuse to obey our orders, don't blame us for being merciless with the military law. With General Xiang Zhuang's cultivation base, you will die on the spot even if I chop your head off 30 to 50 times, don't you think? Xiang Zhuang threw his head back and gave a furious roar into the sky. Then, he stepped on a blood cloud and soared into the sky, flying towards the small river that was washing the single-horned rhinoceros in the distance. The lady holding the commander's seal sighed helplessly, then turned to the other lady clad in a palace dress and said in a low voice, "Elder sister, what do you think?" The lady shook her head silently, then bowed to Yu Ji and Yu Tan and said, "Qi Bin and Lu Mei, please excuse us, elder sisters. The mighty soldiers of Xiang clan are arrogant and unruly, and this is a well-known fact in Great Chu. This time, we still need elder sisters to help Qi Bin and Lu Mei to suppress them, or else, something bad will happen." Yu Ji and Yu Tan exchanged a glance, then Chi nodded his head and said, "We'll obey your orders." While the few ladies were discussing in low voices, suddenly, war cries that sounded like muffled thunders were heard coming from all directions. Towering murderous auras came bursting out from all directions. From afar, one could see armored soldiers of Daqin, clad in black armors, pouring down from the mountain ridges in all directions like a tidal wave. Among these armored soldiers of Daqin, more than 80% of them had the cultivation base of Hotian warriors, and more than 10% had the overall strength of Xiantian Daoist. Then, there were only about 7,000 Jin Dan cultivators, and over 50 nascent soul cultivators. The law of Daqin was very strict. Those who violated the law would be arrested and thrown into prison, without any mercy. In Great Yen Dynasty, if an earth immortal of nascent soul realm violated the law, as long as it was not a rebellion, he could do whatever he wanted, and Yen Dan would not restrain him. However, in Daqin, if an earth immortal of nascent soul realm killed someone without any reason, he would be arrested and sentenced as immortal. Therefore, among these prisoners and felons, there were quite a number of Jin Dan cultivators, and over 50 nascent soul cultivators. Apart from these cultivators who were rushing towards the clay city with bright beams, the rest of the Xiantian Taoists and Hotian warriors were swallowing some pills that were given to them before they set off. These pills could stimulate one's potential, burn one's life force and even soul, and allow one's overall strength to have a great boost in a very short period of time. When a Taoist of Xiantian consumed it, he would possess the strength equivalent to a Jin Dan cultivator for 15 minutes, and when a Hotian warrior consumed it, he would possess the strength equivalent to a Taoist of Xiantian for half an hour. On their chest, back, arms, and legs, there were talismans suddenly flashing and blinking. The talismans on their chest and back were the fiendish spells that could restrain one's soul and control one's corpse. After they were killed, as long as their bodies were still intact, they could still rise up and kill someone in a very short period of time. On the other hand, the talismans on their arms and legs were various talismans that could increase their speed, strength, and explosive force, which could greatly enhance the combative strength of these prisoners. On the forehead of all prisoners, there were black talismans blinking and blinking. These talismans were the soul control talismans set up by the government of Daqin. If any of them tried to flee in the face of danger, or were afraid of death, their souls would be wiped out immediately, and their bodies would explode and kill the enemies around them. Even those Jin Dan and nascent soul cultivators had the same talismans blinking and blinking on their forehead. The law of Daqin was very strict, and everyone was treated equally. Even those cultivators with formidable cultivation base had their nascent divinity planted with restrictive spells, preventing them from fleeing when they were serving their sentence. They were several millions of bloodthirsty beasts who were forced into a dead end, and had no choice but to fight with their lives, hoping to escape from the punishment, get promoted and make a fortune. Amidst the battle cries that shook the mountains and tsunamis, the prisoners of Daqin charged down from the eastern mountain ridge and came before a group of mighty soldiers of Xiang clan, who were having a drill outside the clay city. Howling and howling, these prisoners raised their weapons and leaped towards these elite soldiers of Xiang clan. 100,000 versus 800, this was the overall strength of the soldiers on the flat dam. In almost an instant, the black tide of prisoners had surrounded these elite soldiers of Xiang clan. 800 mighty soldiers of Xiang clan formed into a battle formation, unleashing streams of blood-red energy effortlessly to kill the enemies who came charging at them. Even the weakest soldier among them had the overall strength equivalent to an early-stage Jin Dan cultivator. The streams of blood-red energy unleashed from their weapons stretched for several hundred feet, and with just one strike, they could cut several hundred enemies in half from the waist. However, what happened next shocked these mighty soldiers of Xiang clan. Not a single drop of blood was seen flowing out from the bodies of these Daqin prisoners who were cut in half from the waist. The lower half of their bodies were rushing towards them at top speed, while the upper half of their bodies were using their arms as legs, trying their best to crawl towards them. These mighty soldiers of Xiang clan did not specialize in magic or divine abilities. They only had a strong fleshly body and an enormous amount of energy. Faced with such a bizarre scene, ordinary cultivators could use all kinds of restrictive spells to kill the enemies, but these mighty soldiers of Xiang clan could only passively attack with the weapons in their hands. Suddenly, the bodies of these Daqin prisoners exploded and exploded, like the thorns that were secretly cultivated by the clans of Great Yen Dynasty. Each and every one of their cells exploded, as if they were filled with a highly pressurized gas. Their body fluids had turned into a pitch-black medicinal liquid, emitting a strong smell of herbs and splashing onto the bodies of the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan. Some soldiers did not have the time to circulate their energies to protect themselves, and were splashed by the medicinal liquid. Immediately, countless white blisters emerged on their skin, and in just a blink of an eye, their bodies were corroded and covered with festering wounds. The wounded mighty soldiers of Xiang clan howled and howled miserably. One after another, they exercised the same fiend technique that Xiang Yu and his men were cultivating. The strength of their bodies, defense, and recovery ability were instantly strengthened by several dozens of times. Their skin and flesh were wriggling, quickly healing the corroded wounds on their bodies. The black medicinal liquid and the blood-red light that sprayed out from their bodies were corroding each other, producing jarring sizzling noises. Large sheets of blood-red light kept rushing out from the bodies of these mighty soldiers, blocking off the black poisonous liquid that kept spraying towards them. As these mighty soldiers of Xiang clan were practicing martial arts, they were not wearing any armors, and that was why they were caught unprepared by the Daqin prisoners. However, once they exercised the fiend technique, the defensive strength of the blood-red light that shrouded them was not weaker than the defensive strength of upper-grade magical items and armors. They formed into a formation, unleashing beams of blood-red light as they charged towards the clay city. Several tens of thousands of condemned prisoners had surrounded these mighty soldiers of Xiang clan, and were charging towards them desperately. One after another, the bodies of the condemned prisoners exploded, and the powerful impact made the blood-red light surge and surge. The mighty soldiers of Xiang clan were like a pack of mighty lions, struggling with great difficulty in a vast ocean of marching ants. Finally, several dozens of mighty soldiers of Xiang clan who were lagging behind were forcibly dragged out from the formation by these Daqin prisoners, who were howling and howling in a strange manner. Then, they were slashed and chopped into pieces like a raging storm. When the weapons collided with the bodies of these mighty soldiers, the edges of the blades would roll backward, and flames would burst out from the edges, filling the air with sparks. Only a few insignificant wounds were left on the bodies of these mighty soldiers, and they were healing at an incredible speed. However, when several thousands, tens of thousands of blades and swords kept slashing and slashing on their bodies, these mighty soldiers could only howl and howl miserably as they were chopped into meat paste. In the end, only less than 300 of the 800 mighty soldiers of Xiang clan managed to retreat back to the clay city, while the rest of them were killed in the battle. Behind them, over 30,000 condemned prisoners of Daqin were lying on the ground. Dark blood and red flesh and blood were splattered all over the ground. On the flatland, several million condemned prisoners of Daqin swarmed over, and in just a blink of an eye, the entire flatland was submerged. Over 30,000 mighty soldiers of Xiang clan who were moving about outside the clay city were completely surrounded. Zhang Han hovered in midair, holding the command flag in his hand as he cried out sternly, "Fight to the death! Fight to the death! Kill!" Like some evil ghosts that had gone mad, the condemned prisoners of Daqin began to howl and howl crazily, "Fight to the death! Fight to the death!" Chapter 243. Like landslides and tsunamis, the Daqin prisoners crazily attacked the formation of Xiang Chu's mighty army. Each group of Xiang Chu's soldiers scattered in the surroundings had at most several hundred soldiers, and at least several dozens of them. There was no way they could put up an effective resistance. As they specialized in body tempering, when facing the attacks from Jin Dan human immortals and nascent soul earth immortals, they did not have any good defensive methods. In just less than 10 minutes, 3,000 to 4,000 Xiang Chu soldiers who were surrounded outside the clay city had been killed by the frenzied Daqin prisoners. Each of them had killed at least 30 times the number of enemies. However, the more enemies they killed, the more poisonous liquid would splatter in the air, and the heavier the burden would be on their comrades, which in turn would increase the speed of their destruction. After the first batch of Xiang Chu soldiers was killed, more and more of them could not withstand the onslaught of the crowd, and were trampled to the ground, or chopped into meat paste. Amidst the chaos, Xiang Zhuang suddenly cried out with a stern voice, "Xiang Chu, am the only one who can travel unhindered and look down upon the world. I, Xiang Chu, am the only one who can win every battle." Tens of thousands of Xiang Chu soldiers cried out together, "Xiang Chu, am the only one who can travel unhindered and look down upon the world. I, Xiang Chu, am the only one who can win every battle." A several hundred feet tall blood-red light burst out from Xiang Zhuang's body, fluttering in the sky like a war banner. He raised his sword up high and cried out, "Men of Xiang Chu, follow me and kill the enemies. Don't be fooled by their numbers. They are just a bunch of chickens and dogs, we can wipe them out with one strike." Then, he swung his sword casually, unleashing a sword beam that shot across a distance of nearly 1 mile. Along the way, several hundred Daqin prisoners were cut into 2 halves by Xiang Zhuang. But, the bodies of several hundred prisoners exploded at the same time, sending countless poisonous liquids splashing all over the sky. Another several dozens of Xiang Chu's soldiers were hit by too much poisonous liquid, causing their defensive blood-red light to dim and their bodies to be corroded by the poisonous liquid. But, this sword strike had driven all the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan into a frenzy. Xiang Zhuang was the strongest warrior of Xiang Chu, and he was also a man with the strength to lift mountains and carry cauldrons. When Xiang Yu was not in the camp, Xiang Zhuang was the only person that all the Xiang Chu's soldiers could submit to. All the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan gave a loud cry at the same time, raising their weapons high up and gathering around Xiang Zhuang. Even those mighty soldiers of Xiang clan who were hiding in the clay city had rushed out from the city, forming into a formation and slaughtering the endless Daqin prisoners as they approached Xiang village. Xiang Zhuang threw his head back and laughed complacently. He mounted on a single-horned rhinoceros, spurring the 6-feet-tall rhinoceros to run at the fastest speed. This rhinoceros ran with all its might. Tens of thousands of single-horned rhinoceroses in the surrounding rivers raised their heads and roared at the same time. A large cloud of smoke spurted out from under their feet, and they all soared into the sky. They were running as fast as a gust of wind while they were a foot above the ground. Tens of thousands of sturdy rhinoceroses galloped madly on the flat dam, crushing everything in their path into minced meat. Even the nascent soul cultivators among the prisoners of Daqin didn't dare to face the head-on attack of tens of thousands of rhinoceros monsters who had formed their demon cores. It was a destructive force that could destroy any military formation. Xiang Zhuang rode on the back of one of the rhinoceroses, leading the group of tens of thousands of rhinoceroses as they galloped forward. Tens of thousands of prisoners of Daqin were stabbed to death by these rhinoceroses, and trampled into a thick layer of minced meat. More and more mighty soldiers of Xiang clan joined together with the troop of rhinoceroses. These warriors leaped onto the backs of the rhinoceroses, laughing and yelling as they rode forward. On the top of the clay city, Qi Bin and Lu Mei were holding the commander's talisman in their hands and shouting out loud, forbidding their soldiers from leaving the city without permission. But, how could those mighty soldiers of Xiang clan listen to their orders? Some of the captains saw the commander's talisman in Qi Bin and Lu Mei's hands, but they acted as if they did not see it. While shouting and yelling, they brought their soldiers and charged out of the city at the fastest speed. Yu Ji laughed mockingly and said, "Still the same. Wherever the king is, the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan are invincible. Wherever the king is not, the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan are invincible. He, no matter who is leading the army, without the king, the soldiers of Xiang clan will definitely be defeated." Yu Tan spread her arms, breathed out a deep sigh and said, "So, this is the army of Xiang clan? At that time, I was already dead, so I did not know about the mighty reputation of Xiang clan. Now, it seems that it is indeed the case. With Xiang Yu, the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan are more than enough to sweep across the world. Without him, the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan are just a bunch of..." She twitched her lips and said in a long voice, "However, I'm no longer the Empress Dowager of Great Chu. Even if the army is defeated, Daqin will not be able to defeat them in a short period of time." Meanwhile, Qi Bin and Lu Mei, the 2 beautiful ladies, were trembling with anger. They were not as open-minded as Yu Ji and Yu Tan. Tears were almost streaming down their faces as they said, "How could they do this? How could they do this? This is the commander's talisman personally issued by His Majesty. How could they do this? Turning a blind eye to the military order, and turning a deaf ear to it, this is not." Yu Tan sighed lightly, shook her head and said, "They are not rebelling. They are just not willing to listen to the orders given by us, a group of women. They are just a group of hot-blooded young men with great ambitions, who want to sweep across the world and sweep across the world. How can we, women and children, be qualified to command these fierce warriors? Qibin said furiously, but Daqin has deployed so many condemned prisoners to attack us fiercely. Obviously, there is a trick behind this. If they keep doing this, they will die. A deep, powerful, and magnetic voice rang out slowly from behind the ladies. If they want to die, then so be it. If they are dead, they can be used to craft divine immortal weapons. Divine immortal weapons will never violate the military order. It is they who are courting death, and it has nothing to do with the two imperial concubines. A gentle breeze rustled, as an old man suddenly appeared behind the ladies. He stood over 9 feet tall, and had a fat body. His face was round like a silver basin, and he had a 3 feet long silver beard. He carried himself with an air of elegance and nobility. A few hundred soldiers clad in black armors, their faces covered by pitch-black ghost masks, were following behind the old man soundlessly. Like a group of ghosts in the dark night, they too appeared out of nowhere. Qibin and Lu Mei gave the old man a surprised look, then bowed and said, "Qibin and Lu Mei offer greetings, King of Chunshen." Yuji arched her brows and gave the fat old man a provocative look. Yu Tan, on the other hand, had a charming smile on her face. Like a raging flame, she threw herself into the old man's arms and said, "My lord, long time no see. Do you still remember Yuan, who was cruelly sent to the palace by you?" The fat old man, the former lord of Chunshen of Chu State, and the current king of Chunshen of Great Chu, chuckled as he slapped Yu Tan's voluptuous buttocks and said, "I remember, how could I not? You even gave birth to a chubby boy for me. Too bad that boy was not lucky enough, as he was killed by someone after being the king of Great Chu for a few days. TSK, who is this beauty?" Lord of Chunshen, Huang Xia, licked his lips and fixed his gaze on Yuji. Yuji smiled gently, bowed to Huang Xia and said, "Yuji offers greetings, King of Chunshen. I have long heard of the great name of Lord of Chunshen." Huang Xia's gaze was as sharp as a blade, as if he could rip off all of Yuji's clothes. He laughed in a deep voice and said, "You are Xiang Yu's woman. He seems to be very lucky with women. Hee, where is Xiang Yu? I wonder if I can get you with the land of 3 provinces. Yuji, you are indeed a beauty." Yu Tan pursed her lips, pinched Huang Xia's waist, and gave him a hard twist. "My lord, could it be that you still have the same old temperament, falling in love with every girl you see? Perhaps, Yuan was wrong to come back, and she should not have come back. For the past 2,000 years, Yuan has been trapped in that cave abode, cultivating the heaven-breeding script of Goddess Su, thinking about you day and night, hoping that with my cultivation base, I can once again make you happy. But, it seems that Yuan should not have come back today." Yu Tan gave Huang Xia a heavy punch, then spun and left. This punch caused Huang Xia to howl in pain. The punch had sunk a foot deep into Huang Xia's body, almost shattering Huang Xia's protective clothing. Behind Huang Xia, several hundred armored soldiers pulled out their weapons at the same time, bringing with them countless shadows of ghosts and deities as they charged towards Yu Tan. "How dare you!" cried Huang Xia sternly. "This is my princess, your mistress, Li Yuan. From now on, when you see her, it is the same as when you see me. Do not disobey any of my orders." Huang Xia rubbed his waist, which was nearly pierced by Yu Tan's punch, then spread his arms and pulled Yu Tan into his arms. "Yuan, my little sweetheart, I was just joking. How could that brat Xiang Yu agree to sell his woman to me? It was just a joke, ha ha ha. You see, after so many years, I've been keeping the position of princess for you." He breathed out a deep sigh, then said in a deep voice, "I've even kept the position of prince for you and my child. As long as you can give birth to a child for me, the future king of Chunshen will be that child." Wearing a complicated and slightly bitter smile, Huang Xia gently stroked Yu Tan's cheek and said in a low voice, "It has been over 2,000 years. I have countless beautiful girls by my side, but it took me a lot of effort to find you. I know you must have come here, but why haven't I heard any news from you during these 2,000 years? Yu Tan sighed lightly, then put her arms around Huang Xie's 5 feet tall waist. We'll talk about this later, she said in a low voice. Are you here for these 80,000 elite soldiers of Xiangyu? If you don't strike now, these 80,000 elite soldiers will be completely destroyed. Huang Xie grinned coldly. He straightened his back and said coolly, His Majesty has asked me to come here and help Xiangyu. His Majesty's divination technique has reached an unfathomable level, and he has predicted that Xiangyu will face a bloody calamity this time. Since this is His Majesty's decree, I'll naturally obey it. But, although I'm here, if these men of Xiangyu refuse to listen to my military order, there's nothing I can do. He sighed, hugged Yu Tan, and suddenly threw his head back and gave a loud roar. I, Huang Xie, am here. Xiang Zhuang, His Majesty has issued a decree. Bring your soldiers back here at once. When Xiang Zhuang, who was leading his soldiers and fighting fiercely against the condemned prisoners of Daqin, heard Huang Xie's roar, he turned his body swaggeringly, gave Huang Xie a hand gesture, and said, Old fool, you have no right to interfere in the affairs of Xiang clan. Motherfucker, which bastard opened the teleportation array and let this old man run over here and be so nosy? When I get back, Lao Tzu will definitely chop his entire family into pieces. Upon hearing Xiang Zhuang's roar, Huang Xie clapped his hands contentedly, laughed joyfully, and said, Look, the 2 imperial concubines are my witnesses. Xiang Zhuang is ignoring me. Even if all 80,000 soldiers die here today, it has nothing to do with me. Yuan, the smell of blood is overwhelming here. Let's return to my fief and live a carefree life. Hee, Xiangyu, if he dies here, the great Chu dynasty will be cleared. Yu Tan smiled faintly and quickly exchanged a glance with Yu Ji. While Yu Ji was about to say something, a tremendous force suddenly came smashing down from the sky. Lord Chunshen, Huang Xie. I'd like to invite you to Daqin as a guest. I wonder if I can invite you here. Chapter 244. A dark cloud slowly descended from the sky. Behind Ing Zheng's back, 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent could be vaguely seen twisting and roaring amidst the dark cloud. Li Si, Su Fu, Gigazi, and a few other civil officials were standing on the cloud, looking down at Huang Xie. On the other hand, Ing Zheng was laughing complacently, staring straight at Huang Xie like a hungry wolf who had just laid eyes on a little lamb, wishing he could swallow Huang Xie into his belly in one bite. If he could subdue Huang Xie, a large portion of Great Chu's overall strength would fall into Ing Zheng's hands. In Ing Zheng's eyes, Huang Xie was not an enemy, but a glittering mountain of gold. If he could not persuade Huang Xie to surrender, he could just kidnap him. In any case, Huang Xie was an important figure of Great Chu, and since he had bumped into him, he could never let him go. A dark cloud rose from the top of his head, and the cauldron of Yu had come rolling out from it, bringing with it a great wave of water. The cauldron had accumulated a great amount of blood and energy essence, and the patterns of various monsters on its surface were moving slowly like living creatures. An immense pressure came crashing down from above, pressing down on Huang Xie and the others. Ing Zheng had exerted all his cultivation base, pressing down on Huang Xie with all his might. With a stern air of an emperor, he said word by word, If Duke of Chunshen is willing to surrender to me, you will enjoy the title of a king for generations to come. I will also treat you with the courtesy of a master. After a brief moment of pondering, Huang Xie raised his head, looked at Ing Zheng, smiled and said, Treat me with the courtesy of a master? I don't care about that. If you want me to surrender to Daqin, I can. You can change the way you address me, call me by a nice name. I'll now mobilize my army and annihilate the mighty army of Great Chu. I'll deploy all the armies in Chunshen Kingdom and cooperate with Qin army in attacking Great Chu. Ing Zheng's face flickered, and he cried out sternly, As long as Duke of Chunshen says it, I'll do it. Li Si and Su Fu's faces flickered, and they were about to dissuade Ing Zheng when Huang Xia laughed out loud in a strange voice, "Tisk, that's great. Ing Zheng, actually, I've wanted to tell you this over 2,000 years ago, but I never had the chance. TSK, call me father, then kneel down and give me a few kowtows, and the Chunshan kingdom will be yours." "Ha ha ha, good boy, say something." Ing Zheng's face turned green with anger. "Huang Xia, you are a hero of the generation, but you are worse than a ruffian," he bellowed. Then, he waved his hand casually, and the vast amount of dark gas behind Ing Zheng's back condensed into several hundred black thunderbolts, each the size of a water tank. Huang Xia laughed wildly. Holding Yu Tan's waist, he transformed into a gust of wind and disappeared without a trace. Even with Gigazi's cultivation base, he failed to see what escape art Huang Xia had used. Gigazi felt the natural energy around him move, as if there were tens of thousands of tiny auras of living beings fluctuating in the mountain ridges. Then, Huang Xia, Yu Tan, and the hundreds of armored warriors behind him disappeared. The two beauties, Qi Bin and Lu Mei, looked at each other. Then, they raised their hands and clapped lightly. When they clapped, a heavy rain began to pour down from the sky. The raindrops were mixed with tiny snowflakes and frost, and the cold air instantly froze the several hundred miles wide flat land into a world of ice and snow. Qi Bin and Lu Mei breathed out a faint sigh. Together with the several dozens of serving ladies standing beside them, they moved their bodies and blended into the heavy rain and frost, disappearing without a trace. Suddenly, Gigazi cried out, "This is not the escape art of cultivators, but the heaven and earth ghosts, deities, and spirits magic of those barbarians. Compared to our magic, they can utilize the natural energy more directly, and are even more mysterious and unpredictable. These two girls are barbarian girls, and they are not from the same place as us." Yu Ji sighed lightly. She raised both hands up, and there was a faint dark gleam flickering on her arms. Several hundred huge thunderballs fell into her palms, and with a gentle rub of her delicate hands, they vanished into nothingness. Then, she leaped onto a cloud and flew slowly into the sky, quickly fleeing into the distance. A practitioner with the cultivation base of mid-stage nascent soul realm standing behind Su Fu cried out sternly, "Little girl, how can you leave so easily?" The practitioner dashed forward and casually waved his hand in the air. Immediately, a black rune flashing with lightning bolts emerged out of thin air. He pointed a finger at Yu Ji and cried out sternly, "Stay here. His Majesty's harem is in need of a beauty that can topple a nation." Yu Ji smiled coldly, and her body vanished abruptly. At the same time, she reappeared behind the practitioner with her graceful figure. She thrust her palm out casually, like a red-hot knife cutting into a piece of butter. Soundlessly, Yu Ji's tiny hand went into the practitioner's body, and came out from his dantian. On Yu Ji's slender fingers was a nascent soul, which was struggling and roaring wildly. Yu Ji smiled faintly and clenched her fist. The practitioner's nascent soul immediately turned into countless specks of light and drifted away. Her body flickered again, and before the furious Su Fu could stop her, she had already appeared on top of a mountain about 100 miles away. She looked at them from afar and said softly, "His Majesty, the first emperor of Daqin, Ing Zheng. If you want to take Yu Ji into your harem, you need to defeat His Majesty. Yu Ji is the woman of His Majesty, and unless you defeat him, I will never leave with your Majesty." Another beam of light flashed, and Yu Ji's body had disappeared without a trace. Yu Yao walked out from Ing Zheng's coach, looked at the direction where Yu Ji disappeared, and said coolly, "Over the past 2,000 years, Yu Yao has been spending time with Yu Ji and Li Yuan. What Yu Ji is cultivating is the celestial technique of Goddess Xian, the legendary goddess of the 9 heavens. She has reached 70% mastery in it, and is impervious to water and fire. Weapons made of metal and metal cannot hurt her, and neither can the magic of the 5 elements. Her cultivation technique is very profound, and with just a thought, she can travel 10,000 miles away. Even a cultivator who has formed his nascent divinity cannot catch up with her with the divine ability of teleportation. Yu Yao smiled faintly and said in a deep voice, with her help, Xiang Yu will undoubtedly have a pair of wings on his back. Your Majesty, you need to be careful. That Li Yuan, what cultivation technique is she cultivating? Asked Ding Zheng in a deep voice. Over the past 2,000 years, Li Yuan has been cultivating the heaven-breeding script of Goddess Su. As the name suggests, it allows her to condense the body of Goddess Su and give birth to the power of the heavenly Tao. If an ordinary man were to possess her body, he would be able to condense a Jin Dan out of thin air. If an expert like Huang Xia were to possess her body, with the help of that heavenly energy of Dark Yin, he would most probably be able to break through the realm of heaven immortal very quickly. On top of that, it can help Huang Xia shed his mortal body and form his nascent divinity. In the future, the speed of his cultivation will be greatly improved. Ying Zheng's body turned stiff. He stared at Yu Yao and said coldly, think of a way to capture Li Yuan alive. I want this heavenly energy of Dark Yin. Yu Yao nodded her head lightly and said, perhaps, there is a way. Before Li Yuan holds a certain level of authority in the Chun Shan kingdom, Huang Xia can never touch her. There will be a chance. Yu Yao pursed her lips into a gentle smile, then gently tidied Ying Zheng's slightly messy collar and said, all right. Don't be like how you used to be, trying to snatch every good thing you see. Let's settle the serious business first. Without Xiang Yu, the overall strength of Xiang Yu's mighty army has dropped by more than 1-fold. Eradicating them first is the most important thing. Faint noises of rolling waves could be heard coming from within the cauldron of Yu. Countless shadows of aquatic demons, each the size of a sesame seed, were seen struggling and twisting amidst the sea of blood, while letting out faint but clearly audible cries. Leading the mighty army of Xiang clan, Xiang Zhuang had slaughtered countless condemned prisoners of Daqin. Even the several dozens of condemned prisoners with the cultivation base of nascent soul realm were killed by Xiang Zhuang and Xiang Ta. When the mighty army of Xiang clan formed into a formation and mounted on the single-horned rhinoceros, although they were not equipped with chariots, the combative strength of several tens of thousands of Xiang clan cavalrymen was more than enough to shock anyone. It was especially true when Xiang Ta was holding a long black banner in his hand, summoning several tens of thousands of divine undead soldiers from the nearby clay city and charging together with them. It made it even harder for the condemned prisoners of Daqin to stop them. Wherever the mighty army of Xiang clan went, corpses were strewn all over the ground. Blood splashed and soared into the sky, while countless dead bodies and skeletons were scattered all over the ground. However, the blood essence of all the Daqin prisoners who were killed had vanished into thin air, sucked into the cauldron by Su Fu and the others using a mystic technique. More and more condemned prisoners of Daqin kept rushing down from the mountain ridges, pouring into the flatland and crazily charging towards the mighty army of Xiang clan. Coldly staring at those prisoners who were desperately fighting for their lives, Ying Zheng suddenly said in a cold voice, it's about time, Su Fu, do it now. If these condemned prisoners can make some contribution to me, Daqin, before they die, it will not be in vain that they have come to this mortal world. After they are dead, we'll just have to absolve them of their crimes. Su Fu cupped his fist and answered. After that, a strange gleam flickered in his Dharma eyes of yin and yang, and a black rune that was glinting with an immense evil aura took shape on his forehead. Suddenly, the bodies of the condemned prisoners of Daqin who were charging at high speed turned stiff. The rune on their foreheads suddenly shone brightly, and then their heads exploded at the same time. Countless blooms of blood bloomed in the air, as the blood essence of these dead prisoners suddenly appeared in the cauldron of Yu. Meanwhile, their body fluids, bones, and flesh exploded and turned into a dark poisonous liquid that blotted the sky. Together with a pungent smell of medicine, the liquid transformed into a dark torrent that blotted the sky and blotted the earth, rushing towards the mighty army led by Xiang Zhuang. Xiang Zhuang gave a loud and stern cry, while a large amount of blood-red light burst out from the body of the several tens of thousands of mighty soldiers under his command, protecting them tightly. The dark poisonous liquid clashed forcefully with the blood-red light, quickly corroding the blood-red light and depleting the energies in the bodies of the mighty soldiers at an incredible speed. Amidst sizzling noises, the blood-red light became thinner and thinner, and gradually became as thin as a thin piece of paper. It looked like it was about to be completely corroded by the poisonous liquid. Clang! Suddenly, the enormous amount of blood essence accumulated in the cauldron of Yu transformed into a huge stream of energy, and was absorbed by those ferocious aquatic demons trapped in the cauldron. These aquatic demons, who had been trapped in the cauldron for an unknown number of years, threw their heads back and roared furiously into the sky. After absorbing the energy transformed from the blood essence, they opened their mouths and sprayed out a stream of prime demon energy. The bright, pitch-black demon energy towered into the sky, injecting into the bodies of the 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent who were wheeling and wheeling behind Yin Zheng's back. The bodies of the 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent, which were originally about 1,000 feet long, suddenly expanded to about 3,000 feet. No matter it was their size or their aura, both had increased by a few times. The ripples of energy emanating from Yin Zheng's body became like the raging waves of the ocean. The vast and endless ripples of energy transformed into dark mists that one could see with naked eyes, rolling and rolling out from Yin Zheng's body. Using the blood essence of several million condemned prisoners as a sacrifice, and borrowing the mighty divine power of the cauldron of Yu, Yin Zheng had forcibly elevated his cultivation base to a realm that was infinitely close to the realm of heaven immortal. Yin Zheng threw his head back and let out a loud laugh. Casually, he produced the sword of Emperor Qin, which transformed into a 1,000 feet long flood dragon. Abruptly, it transformed into countless golden sword energies that shot out in all directions, thrusting towards the mighty army of Xiang clan down below. 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, sword sweep 6 directions, cried Yin Zheng. Countless golden sword energies blanketed an area of 1,000 miles in circumference. The color of the weather changed, and the natural energies were all sucked dry by the sword energies. There was no other aura or light between the heaven and the earth, only Yin Zheng's black dragon energies and golden sword energies that filled the void. Several tens of thousands of divine undead soldiers were ripped to shreds by the sword energies, and one after another, the mighty army of Xiang clan was torn to pieces amidst the raging golden tides. Large groups of single-horned rhinoceroses threw their heads back and howled, trying to break out from the area covered by the deadly sword energies. But, the sword energies were everywhere, enveloping everything. One after another, all the single-horned rhinoceroses fell to the ground with blood spraying out from their mouths, their bones, flesh, and souls shattered by the sword energies. Xiang Zhuang, Xiang Ta, and all the captains of Xiang clan roared furiously and leaped into the sky, burning the fiend energy pearls in their bodies, trying to defend against the boundless sword energies. But, when the sword energies flashed, Xiang Zhuang, Xiang Ta, and all the other captains fell down from the sky, bathed in blood. Xiang Ta roared furiously. Casually, he threw out a couple dozens of talismans made from bamboo boards, which transformed into a large sheet of green light that enveloped all the trusted captains and personal guards of Xiang clan, then vanished into thin air. Less than 3,000 captains and soldiers of Xiang clan managed to escape, while the rest of the mighty army of Xiang clan were all slaughtered by Yin Zheng. Chapter 245. Outside Meng Fortress, the 5 demon kings of Meng Mountains were besieging Xiangyu, sending his bones and flesh flying in all directions. It was especially true for Jin Jia and Xiong Wanling. These 2 demon kings were ferocious by nature, and they did not like to attack their enemies with magic. Instead, they would resort to violent attacks. Wherever their punches and kicks went, blood and flesh would fly in all directions. Su Meier's pinkish flying sword and He Qianqiu's cranebeak scissors kept piercing Xiang Yu's body, breaking his bones and making him scream miserably. However, the one that hurt Xiang Yu the most was undoubtedly Hu Wuyu's rotting bones and soul-devouring energy. Not only was the vicious corpse energy melting Xiang Yu's muscles and bones, it was also crazily corroding his nascent divinity. Through Wu Qi's mystic eyes of universe, Xiang Yu's nascent divinity was struggling to resist the attack from the blood shadow of the celestial fiend behind his back. Then, under the double attack of the corpse energy, Xiang Yu's nascent divinity was like a flickering candle in a raging wind, about to be extinguished at any time. Once the nascent divinity was extinguished, everything would turn into nothingness. With a cold gaze, Wuqi looked at Xiangyu, who had no strength to fight back. Suddenly, he waved his left arm and activated the earth element dragon scale shield. Several tens of thousands of dragon scale-shaped golden beams were shrouded in a thick layer of yellowish earth energy, thrusting straight towards Xiangyu amidst deep, muffled wind-breaking noises. Each of these dragon scale-shaped golden beams weighed several hundreds of thousands of kilograms. Coupled with the high-speed impact, which was a few times faster than the speed of sound, the force brought by these golden beams was enough to easily penetrate several dozens of lofty mountains. Countless golden beams pierced through the rotting bones and soul-devouring energy like a thunderstorm, smashing viciously onto Xiangyu's body. Xiangyu's pale black bones were brutally struck by these golden beams. The incredibly sharp dragon scale-shaped golden beams were extremely heavy and fast, shattering his bones inch by inch. Countless golden beams shuttled back and forth, smashing on Xiangyu's body, peeling off the last bit of his skin and flesh, and shattering his bones layer by layer. Deep, muffled noises of collision kept ringing out. Suddenly, Xiangyu's body was left with a head shrouded in a blood-red light, while the rest of his body was smashed to pieces by the golden beams shot out from the earth element dragon scale shield. All 5 demon kings were taken aback by Wuqi's response. Only they knew how tough Xiangyu's body was. They had to rely on their own strength and the power of upper-grade magical treasures to tear his body apart. The fact that the earth element dragon scale shield could hurt Xiangyu's fleshly body proved that the power of this magical treasure was not weak at all. They glanced at Wuqi almost at the same time. The shape and aura of the dragon scales were very conspicuous. They recognized the origin of these golden lights. The golden light was covered in a thick yellow earthy aura, causing them to nod slowly. They knew that Wuqi had bought a clump of innate earth element energy essence during the Rare Treasures conference. However, they did not expect Wuqi to refine this thing into a protective magic treasure so quickly. This kid is really lucky. Huo Wuyu took a deep breath, gave a long and loud cry, and sprayed out another clump of corpse-accumulating energy. The golden beams shot out from the earth element dragon scale shield pierced through the pale green corpse-accumulating energy. Only the dragon scales, which were protected by the innate earth element energy, could ignore the frightening power of the corpse-accumulating energy, and not be corroded by it easily. Huo Wuyu's face turned unsightly. It was obvious that this defensive magical treasure of Wuqi could resist his strongest innate divine ability. After a series of attacks, Xiangyu was left with only a skull. Sparks and blood sprayed in all directions under the joint attacks of the crowd. However, the banner of Qiyu had transformed into a clump of dense blood-red energy and wrapped around the skull. No matter how hard the crowd attacked, they could not do anything to the formidable defense of the banner of Qiyu. Whether it was Wuqi or the 5 demon kings, none of them possessed the murderous aura of the human emperor Xianyuan, which was used to kill Qiyu. It was the only nemesis of the banner of Qiyu, and it was impossible for Wuqi and the others to possess such an aura. Yan Dan frowned as he stared at Xiangyu's skull, which was shrouded by the banner of Qiyu. The aura of life and death was rolling and rocking violently around him, yet he did not have any good ideas to deal with the banner of Qiyu. Obviously, as he was cultivating the reincarnation technique of 9 death and 9 resurrection, the banner of Qiyu did not have much effect on it. Frankly speaking, the aura of the human emperor emanating from Yan Dan was not as strong as Ing Zheng's, let alone the ancient human emperor Xuanyuan's. The banner of Qiyu wrapped Xiangyu's skull, and a dense blood-red murderous aura kept rushing into it. The blood-red celestial fiend behind Xiangyu twisted and turned rapidly, crazily invading his nascent divinity. Together with the attack of the rotting bones and soul-devouring energy, Xiangyu's nascent divinity could no longer withstand the joint attack from the 3 parties. Suddenly, his nascent divinity disintegrated, transforming into a sheet of blinding blood-red light that shot out from all 7 apertures of his skull. "You have pushed me too far." Xiangyu's voice slowly came out from the hideous skull. Yuji, I've waited for over 2,000 years, and this is how you treat me?" Xiangyu howled mournfully, if that is the case, I will sacrifice myself and become a fiend, transforming into the true body of a celestial fiend. I will abandon all the mercy, compassion, warmth, and kindness of mortals, and transform into the true ancient war devil of Chiyu. I will fight for supremacy with all of you, and we will see who is the true lord of the heaven and earth, and who is the #1 hero under the heaven. The blood-red celestial fiend behind Xiang Yu quickly fused into his skull. The banner of Chiyu transformed into a sheet of glittering light and fused into the skull. Xiang Yu's nascent divinity was reborn in his spiritual ocean. It was a blurry and sticky figure formed from countless amounts of blood. Although the figure was still blurry, as if it had not completely taken shape, it was already emanating a boundless fiend flame and murderous aura. Wave after wave of frightening aura that could make one's blood boil, and make one grab the weapon in one's hand and slaughter wantonly, was gradually spreading out from within Xiang Yu's skull. Princess Zhang Li's face fell suddenly. Xiang Yu's skull grinned hideously and said, "How dare a little girl like you trap me with the soul-sealing curse? Break!" As Xiang Yu gave a light cry, a tiny blood-red dot flickered in the void, and a hair-thin blood-red flame shot out from it, following closely behind Princess Zhang Li's soul and the soul-sealing curse she unleashed. Then, the faint connection between the soul-sealing curse and the soul-sealing curse began to burn towards Princess Zhang Li. Princess Zhang Li's curse was completely broken, and her soul was injured by the backlash. Suddenly, she coughed out a mouthful of blood. Upon smelling the scent of blood, the blood-red flame accelerated towards Princess Zhang Li. Wu Qi casually waved his hand, transforming the earth element dragon scale shield into a thick and heavy yellow energy barrier that enveloped him and Princess Zhang Li. 36,000 dragon scales began to circle around Wu Qi according to the orbits of the stars in the universe. Accompanied by the roars of countless wandering souls, the blood-red flame rushed over and slammed viciously onto the dragon scales and the yellow energy barrier. A loud boom rang out, and the blood-red flame exploded. Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Li were knocked flying away by a tremendous murderous force, falling into the Meng fortress in a sorry state. They smashed through several dozens of tall buildings in a row before finally smashing to the ground. Fortunately, they were protected by the earth element dragon scale shield. Although they suffered some shock, they were not seriously injured. Holding Princess Zhang Li in his arms, Wu Qi sprung up to his feet and cried out sternly, "Cultivators of Meng Fortress, listen to my command. Kill Xiang Yu with thunder magic. I'd like to see if this Xiang Yu is really unkillable and indestructible." Xiantian cultivators could not lock down Xiang Yu from 100 miles away with their divine sense. However, Jin Dan human immortals and earth immortals of nascent soul realm could use their divine abilities to injure their enemies from 100 miles away. With the title of Westfield Headquarters Deputy Chief Supervisor, Wu Qi gave out his order. Among the several tens of thousands of cultivators in Meng Fortress, there were 20 nascent soul cultivators and over 100 Jin Dan cultivators. One after another, they locked down Xiang Yu with their divine sense, unleashing various spirit talismans and magical techniques. Bolts of thunderbolts mixed with the rotting bones and soul-devouring energy struck Xiang Yu's skull, exploding and filling the sky with blinking blood-red light. The fiend flame of the banner of Chiyu surged higher and higher, while the skull protecting Xiang Yu let out a deafening roar, leaving behind a beam of blood-red light as it fled towards the depth of Meng Mountains. Once again, the natural energies from all directions rushed crazily towards Xiang Yu, fusing into his skull. On his skull, strands of skin and flesh grew out at an incredible speed, while blood-red hair grew out from his scalp as well. Very soon, a 10-feet-long blood-red hair grew out from his skull. Amidst a series of cracking noises, a newly born, pale black, half-transparent spine poked out from underneath his skull. With this spine as the center, ribs, pelvis, and many other bones kept growing out. In just the time of a few breaths, all the bones in Xiang Yu's body were completely reborn. On top of that, the defensive strength of this newly born skeleton was at least 10 times stronger than before. When Xiong Wanling's bare paw, Jin Jia's hammer, Su Meier's flying sword, and He Qianqiu's crane beak landed on Xiang Yu's body, they could only produce large amounts of sparks and leave deep marks on his skin. none of them could break his bones. The thunderbolts that blotted the sky kept falling down, but they only covered Xiang Yu's bones with a thick layer of thunderbolts, and failed to break his defense. Even when the most vicious rotting bones and soul-devouring energy kept sprinkling on Xiang Yu's bones, it could only produce large amounts of blood-red ripples, and could not cause any more damage to his body. The banner of Qiyu shot out from the top of Xiang Yu's head, shrouded in an eerie blood-red gleam. The blood-red gleam that covered the area of 1,000 feet in circumference kept Huoyu's soul-devouring energy at bay. Xiang Yu, who had given up the persistence in his nascent divinity and chose to completely fuse with the fiend's soul he cultivated, had gradually transformed into a true immortal fiend body. The defensive strength and recovery ability of his body had been improved to an astonishing level. On his glowing bones, dark purple muscles, meridians, and blood vessels began to grow at an incredible speed. Before long, when Xiang Yu had just fled tens of miles away, his body had fully grown, and it was even stronger and taller than his original body. At first glance, the muscles on his body looked like alloy ingots, sharp and angular, glinting with an eerie cold gleam. The banner of Qiyu was spinning at an incredible speed. Just as Xiang Yu was about to flee into Meng Mountains, a plume of dark mist suddenly towered up into the sky from the front. Amidst the dark mist, 8 crocodile-shaped black alligators with 2 horns on their heads leaped out, opened their mouths and pounced viciously towards Xiang Yu. Xiang Yu, who had just recovered his body and was still very weak, was thrown to the ground by the tremendous force of these alligators. The banner of Qiyu rolled up, unleashing a blood-red beam that rolled up 5 alligators and threw them several hundred feet high into the air. However, a few crocodiles leaped onto Xiang Yu's body and tore a deep wound on his chest, from which sticky blood kept spraying out. "Who dares to hurt me?" Xiang Yu bellowed furiously. A thunderclap rang out, as a chariot pulled by 4 horses and escorted by several hundred guards flew out from the mountain ridge. On the chariot stood a handsome man, clad in a black robe and wearing a black and gold crown on his head. The young man, clad in the 8 dragons soaring cloud robe and holding a long spear, cried out sternly, "Xiang Yu, you will die here today." "Is Yan Dan here?" "I am Ing Ziying, the Daqin, and today, I will settle the score with Xiang Yu for killing me in the past." Yan Dan, Yan Dan. Let's join hands and kill Xiang Yu. Isn't that a pleasure? Princess Zhanglu blinked her eyes and asked, "Ing Ziying? Who is he?" "I can't believe he is also cultivating the 9 dragons cauldron grand magic, and he has even formed the power of 8 flood dragons." Meanwhile, Wu Qi took a deep breath and said, "Ing Ziying, I suppose he is a member of Ing Zheng's imperial clan?" Ing Ziying, the last monarch of Qin dynasty, the Prince of Qin. Chapter 246. Holding the spear in his hand, Ing Ziying had 8 alligators roaring into the sky behind him. They kept slamming and attacking Xiang Yu, leaving many wounds on his body. Alligators were a species of flood dragons, and among all flood dragons, they could only be considered as lower-grade flood dragons with a thin bloodline. However, they had thick and heavy scales, a very strong brute force, and 4 sharp claws that could cut through mountains. Although they had a very low status in the Flood Dragon clan, their overall strength was not weaker than a true Flood Dragon. If they could transcend into a heaven immortal and transform into a true dragon, their overall strength would only be about 30% of the strength of a true Flood Dragon. But, when they were still Flood Dragons, their overall strength would not be weaker than any middle or upper-grade Flood Dragon with a very pure bloodline. Ing Ziying was also cultivating the 9 dragons cauldron grand magic, and the dragon souls he used were 8 alligators, which gave him some of the characteristics of alligators, namely, a strong fleshly body and a matchless divine strength. In terms of the strength of his fleshly body, he was a few times stronger than Ing Zheng, who had formed the 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent. It was just that he was not as strong as Ing Zheng in terms of divine abilities and magical power. Now, he alone was able to stop Xiang Yu, who was severely wounded, and was able to fight Xiang Yu without falling into a disadvantageous position. Xiang Yu threw his head back and roared furiously. As the coiling dragon spear was destroyed in the fierce battle just now, Xiang Yu could only fight the enemy with his bare fists. He waved both fists in a disorderly manner, throwing a series of punches at Ing Ziying's face and head. Ing Ziying wielded the spear in his hand in a strict manner. None of his moves were fancy, but they were as powerful as a great mountain, pressing down on Xiang Yu with his divine strength. As Xiang Yu was severely wounded and had just entered the fiend state, he could not withstand the power of 8 flood dragons unleashed by Ing Ziying. As a result, he was pushed back by the spear, and the tip of the spear kept poking out streams of blood from his body. Xiang Yu kept letting out deep and mindless roars, and like a wild beast that had gone mad, he kept leaping and attacking Ing Ziying desperately. Although he had consumed too much of his strength, and his offensive strength had been greatly reduced, the recovery ability of his body had reached an abnormal level. In just a few breaths of time, the wounds left by Ing Ziying on his body were completely healed. No matter how Ing Ziying had left over 100 transparent wounds on Xiang Yu's body, he still could not kill Xiang Yu. Coldly, Yan Dan watched the fight between Ing Ziying and Xiang Yu. Suddenly, he raised his right hand and cried out, "Generals, listen to my order. Join forces with Prince Ing of Qin and kill Xiang Yu." Yan Dan gave the men around him a wink, then his lips moved slightly as he gave out another order, to cooperate with Ing Ziying in killing Xiang Yu, and let Ing Ziying take the vanguard. After killing Xiang Yu, he immediately unleashed his full strength and captured Ing Ziying alive. If they couldn't capture him alive, they would kill him on the spot. Jing Ke was the first to let out a loud laugh. With a twist of his body, he abruptly transformed into a dazzling white beam that was as thick as a fist, piercing through 100 miles of void and piercing straight through Xiang Yu's body. The Tai-Bai sun-piercing dragon technique was derived from Jing Ke's assassination of Ing Zheng, the emperor of Qin, in a fit of rage. It was like the Tai-Bai sun-piercing dragon, a rainbow piercing through the sky. The grand white essence Qi in his body condensed into a beam of white light with extremely strong penetrating power, like a divine weapon. Even if it was an upper-grade magic treasure or a spirit artifact, it would be pierced through by the beam of white light without any resistance. As for Xiang Yu's body, a hole the size of a bowl was left behind by the white beam that Jing Ke had unleashed. On top of that, the wound was smooth and clean, without any burrs. The flesh and blood on the wound kept wriggling, trying to heal his body. Yet, there was a very powerful and sharp energy lingering near the wound. Right when the newly grown flesh and blood began to grow, it was immediately shredded into pieces by the sharp energy. Even with Xiang Yu's fiendish immortal celestial fiend body, he still could not heal the wound in a short period of time. Jing Ke gave a long and sonorous cry, as he transformed into a figure several tens of miles away, surrounded by wisps of white mist. He gasped lightly, looked at Xiang Yu, threw his head back and gave a loud laugh. "Xiang Yu, little punk, do you think a strike from Jing Ke is enough for you to endure?" The Tai-Bai sun-piercing dragon technique had gathered all the energy in Jing Ke's body, allowing him to unleash a desperate strike. By concentrating all his spirit, energy, and spirit into one spot, he would be able to unleash an incredible force. This was the essence of Jing Ke's cultivation technique. Therefore, although it was just a single strike, it had taken a great toll on Jing Ke. The strike had consumed about 50% of his energy, and that was why he was panting and hurriedly circulating his breath to restore his cultivation. A blood-red gleam shot out from Xiang Yu's eyes, as he glared at Jing Ke and howled into the sky, "Jing Ke, I'm going to kill you." Xiang Yu's body and nascent divinity had both been turned into fiendish. At this moment, he had lost all his senses. The more damage he suffered, the stronger his instinct would drive him to attack. Jing Ke's strike had caused a very serious damage to his body. Immediately, Xiang Yu abandoned Ing Ziying, who was attacking him with all his might. Roaring and roaring, he sprinted towards Jing Ke while emanating a blood-red gleam that blotted the sky. Ing Ziying gave a loud laugh, then waved his spear and unleashed several dozens of black beams that took the shape of an alligator and a dragon, hitting Xiang Yu in a row. These heavy blows ripped a large amount of flesh and blood from Xiang Yu's body, exposing his pale black bones. The banner of Qi Yu let out a shrill roar of a warrior, while a large sheet of blood-red gleam rushed out from Xiang Yu's body and fused into the banner, covering an area of 1,000 feet in circumference and firmly protecting Xiang Yu. Ying thrust his spear again, but when the dragon-shaped beam hit the banner of Qi Yu, it only produced a few insignificant blood-red ripples, and did not hurt Xiang Yu at all. On the contrary, Ying's spear was twisted and turned by the banner of Qi Yu, causing a severe pain in his wrist and nearly making the spear fly out of his hand. Ying was greatly shocked. He quickly dragged the spear and retreated backward, but Xiang Yu's attention was once again attracted by his attack. Without hesitation, he thrust his fist towards Ying. Suddenly, a vast and mighty murderous blood energy sprayed out from the banner of Qi Yu, quickly fusing into Xiang Yu's fist. It transformed into a fierce tiger fist with a sharp horn on its head, thrusting towards Ying's back amidst a shrill tiger roar. When this several hundred feet long blood-red tiger made its appearance, the surrounding natural energies were immediately swept away, and all the flowers and trees in the woods withered and died at the same time. An immense aura of death soared up from the ground, transforming into countless pitch-black palms that grabbed towards Ying's body amidst cruel ghost howls. Ying was caught off guard, and was grabbed by these black palms that came out of nowhere. His body was tightly gripped by these black palms, and he could not move at all. The blood-red tiger approached his body at an incredible speed, and when it was about to reach Ying's back, it shrunk into a fist about the size of a human head, then smashed brutally into the middle of Ying's back. A loud boom rang out, followed by countless battle bugles. The dragon robe worn by Ying was ripped to shreds, and his spine was broken inch by the fist. Blood burst out from his 7 apertures, and he was knocked flying several miles away by the fist. Seeing that Ying was severely wounded by Xiang Yu, Yan Dan clapped his hands and said with a loud laugh, "Excellent. Quickly capture Ying alive." Before his words could fade away, all the guards brought here by Ying gave a loud cry at the same time. Suddenly, their skins exploded, revealing their metallic bodies that shone with a dazzling gleam underneath. These guards were all metal demon figurines that had their faces covered with human skins. When they saw their target was wounded, they immediately revealed their true faces, striding towards Ying. Several hundred demon figurines stood in a circular formation around Ying. Dazzling gleams could be seen flashing and blinking under their feet, as they quickly formed into a large teleportation formation. An enormous amount of energy rushed out from these metal demon figurines and surged into the teleportation formation, providing it with enough power to break through the void. Suddenly, Ying and the several hundred demon figurines' bodies turned blurry, and then disappeared into thin air. Mod stared at the direction where Ying and the demon figurines disappeared with astonishment. He smiled delightedly and said, "By carving a part of the teleportation formation into these demon figurines, when needed, these several hundred demon figurines can activate the restrictive spells in their bodies, and immediately form a moving teleportation formation." It was indeed a strange and wonderful idea, too wonderful for words. This must be Gigazi's ingenious idea. How could anyone else have such an ability? Sun Kuang nodded his head, smiled, and said, "It must be Brother Wang Su's idea. Chimen Duanjia, mechanisms and concealed weapons. Under the heaven, only Brother Wang Su alone can fight against Mo sect." Mod rubbed his palms excitedly and said, "I wonder how powerful these demon figurines of Qin army are. Perhaps, Mo sect will have to bring out all those powerful war machines produced by them over the years and have a final showdown with Qin army. Especially the Mo city. This old man has always wanted to see exactly how powerful the Mo city is." While both of them were praising Gigazi's divine ability, on the other side, Yan Dan had personally brought many captains and ministers, encircling Xiang Yu in 3 layers of encirclement. The 3 of them led many great Yan cultivators and deployed various restrictive spells and formations, completely covering the void. Xiang Yu was roaring furiously and slashing left and right, but there was no way he could break through. Fan Yuqi, whose body was burly and huge like an iron ingot, held a pair of crescent-shaped halberds in his hands, and fearlessly rushed up and engaged in a close combat with Xiang Yu. The main cultivation technique Fan Yuqi cultivated was the earthly indestructible body of indestructible sect. As a result, his fleshly body was incredibly strong. There was also a very powerful innate spirit item hiding in his body, which seemed to be an earth element innate spirit item. Fan Yuqi's fleshly body had been nourished and tempered by the innate earth element energy for over 2,000 years, and the incredible defensive strength of his fleshly body made even Wu Qi, who was watching the battle, shake his head. He is just like a stone in a latrine pit, smelly and hard. I can't break it. Wu Qi could not help but shake his head as he watched Xiang Yu land several hundred punches on Fan Yuqi's body in a row, only producing a large number of sparks, and not even a single hair of Fan Yuqi's was harmed. The tempering of the fleshly body was a laborious and time-consuming work. Fan Yuqi also had an innate earth element spirit item with him, and the earthly indestructible body of indestructible body that he had spent over 2,000 years to cultivate had reached the limit of the fleshly body below the realm of heaven immortal. Unless it was a heaven immortal, not even Wanying Dragon King could leave a single scratch on his skin. Compared to Fan Yuqi's fleshly body, Wu Qi's Dharma body of earth immortal was as fragile as the shell of an egg. Let it go. He has been cultivating for over 2,000 years, but how long have I been cultivating for? Wu Qi bared his teeth and stared at Fan Yuqi, who was fighting head-on with Xiang Yu. He felt a sharp pain in his teeth. Suddenly, another golden light flashed. Among the 5 demon kings, Gold Armor, who had the strongest fleshly body, had joined the battle as well, working together with Fan Yuqi to restrain Xiang Yu. Gold Armor's true form was a strange beast, the Gold Devourer. Since he was young, he had been devouring gold element energies. Therefore, his fleshly body was extremely strong, even stronger than Fan Yuqi's. With 2 fellows with freakish fleshly bodies tangling with Xiang Yu, he had no chance to escape. It seemed that the group of Great Yan's ministers were about to kill or capture Xiang Yu on the spot, but suddenly, a pitch-black crack opened up in the void, from which came 2 huge hands that looked like they were carved out of white jade, pressing down slowly. With a point of a finger, the defensive formation laid out by Great Yan's tens of thousands of cultivators was shattered. Fan Yuqi and Gold Armor let out a muffled snort as they were knocked flying 100 miles away, their bodies sinking several dozens of miles deep into the ground. Then, the 2 huge hands gently grabbed Xiang Yu, bringing him into the dark crack in the void. Your Majesty, Yan Dan, Xiang Yu is the strongest general of Great Chu. We can't let your Majesty kill him. Great Chu's Chu Ping offers greetings. Great Chu and Great Yan have never had anything to do with each other. Our greatest enemy is Daqin. Why don't Great Chu and Great Yan join hands and fight against Daqin together? Looking at Xiang Yu, who was quickly dragged into the dark crack by the 2 huge hands, Yan Dan pondered for a brief moment, then cried out sternly, "All right." Chapter 247. A muffled rumble echoed out, as the city gate of Meng Fortress slowly opened. Together with Wu Qi, 10,000 warriors clad in dark green armors, blood-red capes draped over their shoulders, helmets adorned with blood-red swan feathers, and armors so polished that they looked like mirrors, walked slowly out of the city gate and lined up in a formation to welcome the guests. The sound of drumming echoed out. Behind the formation, Yan Dan was seen sitting on a chariot, walking slowly out of the city. Amidst the mountain ridges outside the city, countless grasses and trees suddenly swayed even though there was no wind. The rustling of the pine trees shook the ground. Amidst the dense grasses, countless tiny wildflowers suddenly sprouted, blooming in large patches of colorful flowers. The splendid sea of flowers stretched from the mountain ridges far away to the city gate of Meng Fortress. A very strong natural energy was emanating from these lowly wildflowers. The natural energy unleashed by these wildflowers that could be found everywhere was comparable to those spirit herbs that had been growing for several hundred years. Amidst the grasses and trees that swayed even though there was no wind, one could vaguely see the shadows of a great number of mountain ghosts and wild deities. These ghosts and deities had blurry faces, and their clothes were oddly ancient. Judging from the energy ripples emanating from them, the weakest among them was equivalent to a cultivator of Jin Dan realm. A few of them were clad in an ancient long robe, with a tall crown on their head, and their facial features clear like a living person. The energy ripples emanating from their bodies were almost at the same level as the 5 demon kings. However, these mountain ghosts and deities were, after all, living beings of Yin nature. They were constantly restrained and suppressed by the righteous energy of the heaven and earth. Although the energy ripples emanating from them had reached the realm of nascent divinity, the overall strength they could unleash was still much weaker than the 5 demon kings. Nevertheless, the number of these mountain ghosts and deities was huge. At first glance, Wuqi estimated that there were at least several 100,000 of them, and perhaps there were at least 100 nascent divinity ghosts and deities hiding among them. Due to the restraint of the heaven and earth, the overall strength of these ghosts and deities was suppressed. However, when nearly 100 ghosts and deities, Chi-Chi, who emanated the pressure of nascent divinity, appeared, their overall strength still made Yen Dan's face turn stiff. A bright green gleam shone from Wuqi's eyes, as he stared greedily at these mountain ghosts and deities. These ghosts and deities were all extremely condensed Yin deity bodies. If one could capture them alive and refine them with the divine flame of order, they would be able to greatly nourish one's soul and nascent divinity. To any cultivator, they were the best tonic. The most amazing thing was that although these wild mountain ghosts were emitting terrifying waves of magical power, their strength was on average 1 level lower than their cultivation level. If they really wanted to make a move, even a nascent soul-level ghost could be easily taken down. Soul and primordial spirit were the foundation of a cultivator. Being able to improve it even a little bit was a great opportunity. The sudden appearance of so many wild mountain ghosts and deities in front of Wuqi was equivalent to a large number of great tonic pills taking the initiative to deliver themselves to him. Wuqi was already thinking about how to subdue a few of these ghosts and deities. Gusts of chilly wind brushed past their ankles and brushed past their ankles. Suddenly, those ghosts and deities saw Chi-Chi bowing to them and said, "We, the lonely souls of the wilderness, offer our greetings to the Emperor of Great Yen Dynasty. May Great Yen Dynasty enjoy the eternal reign and reign for all ages." A loud boom rang out, as a lofty mountain in the distance suddenly crumbled and crumbled. A giant serpent, about 1 mile in diameter, its body covered in pale golden scales, its head protruding with a pair of horns, and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, slowly squeezed out from underneath the crumbling mountain. The serpent was ridiculously huge, with its body measuring about 1 mile in diameter reaching a height of 70 to 80 miles. With just a wiggle of its body, the gigantic head of the serpent had arrived before the front gate of Meng Fortress. Slowly, the serpent slid down to the ground, lying flat on the ground. The length of its body that was exposed from underneath the mountain was already 70 to 80 miles long, and it was unknown how much more of its body was still hiding under the ground. However, no one really cared how big this serpent was. Just the fact that it had exposed half of its body to the ground had already frightened most of the soldiers in Meng Fortress. Clang! Clang! Some of the soldiers standing next to Wuqi who were welcoming the guests dropped their weapons to the ground. Without batting an eyelid, Wuqi turned his head and gave those soldiers who were trembling with fear a glance. It scared them so much that they quickly picked up their weapons and mustered up their courage to stop their legs from trembling. A descendant of Ba Shi. Wuqi looked at the giant serpent and nodded his head silently. Ba Shi was one of the largest serpents under the heaven according to the legends. Perhaps, it would be more appropriate to call this Ba Shi before his eyes as a flood dragon. It had grown a pair of horns, which indicated that it was a flood dragon. Judging from its gigantic size, its muscle strength must be extremely strong. Even though Fan Yuqi and Jin Jia were cultivators who could defeat their opponents by relying on their divine strength, in front of this giant serpent, they were no different than ants. On top of the giant serpent's head stood a middle-aged man with a tall crown and a long robe, his face handsome. Not a single trace of dermic energy could be sensed from this man, and he looked no different from any ordinary uncle next door. He stood steadily on the head of the giant serpent, quietly looking at Yen Dan. Yen Dan was staring at the middle-aged man as well. After a full 15 minutes, he nodded and said, "The Emperor of Great Chu, Chu Ping?" Chu Ping smiled and said, "Chu Ping of Great Chu offers greetings, Your Majesty Yen Dan." He landed on the ground and lightly patted the head of the giant serpent, then walked to the front of Yen Dan's chariot, nodded his head and said, "Chu Ping has come with the sincerity to form an alliance with Great Yen, to help each other and survive in this world." Yen Dan gave Chu Ping a deep look, pondered for a brief moment, then chuckled and said, "Why Great Yen? Why not some other dynasties?" Chu Ping nodded his head, smiled and said, "Do I need any more reasons? Great Chu is located in the extreme south, while Great Yen is located in the extreme north. It is almost impossible for both dynasties to have any conflict. As the saying goes, befriending the distant and attacking the nearby, it is nothing more than this. If you and I are to form an alliance, it will be a great thing that will benefit both of us, and there will be no conflict of interests." Yen Dan walked down from the chariot and bowed to Chu Ping. Chu Ping returned the bow to Yen Dan as well. After that, both of them entered the chariot hand in hand. Music and drums were playing in the surroundings. Leading a large company of soldiers, Wu Qi escorted the chariot into Meng Fortress. Wu Qi rode behind the chariot, staring at Chu Ping, who was wearing a gentle expression and a smile on his face, looking just like an ordinary middle-aged uncle. His eyes were filled with curiosity, excitement, and a trace of complicated emotion that could not be put into words. To Wu Qi, heroes such as Yen Dan, Ying Zheng, and Xiang Yu, the peerless overlords, they were just some names recorded in the history books. Although they left a deep impression in his mind, he did not have much feelings for them. Only this Chu Ping, the minister of Third Lu of Great Chu State, Chu Ping, his influence on the earth had lasted until today. Among all the heroes of the Warring States period, he was the only one who could be engraved in the hearts of the common people several thousand years later, and even had a traditional festival because of him. Whether it was Ying Zheng or Xiang Yu, both of them were outstanding in both political and martial arts. However, the only one who could maintain his influence for several thousand years was the minister of Third Lu, Chu Ping. When faced with a man like this, how could Wu Qi not feel curious, and how could he not give him a few more glances? Especially because of the professional habit of Wu Qi, he exercised the mystic eyes of universe and stealthily gave Chu Ping a glance at the ordinary clothing worn by him. As a result, through the vision of the mystic eyes of universe, Wu Qi found that although the long robe, tall hat, and ornaments worn by Chu Ping looked simple and crude, and did not have any luster on the outside, they were actually glowing with a bright glow, and were densely packed with countless restrictive spells. Everything he has is a treasure. Wu Qi sighed with mixed emotions in his mind. It was not a big deal that Chu Ping had a lot of magical treasures, as it was expected for someone of his status. However, when he was observing Chu Ping with the mystic eyes of universe, Wu Qi discovered something even more astonishing. Behind Chu Ping, there was a hazy figure hovering about 1,000 feet tall, constantly absorbing a wisp of the power of faith in the void. This is the primordial Tao of divinity. The Tao of divinity used by those mighty living beings in the ancient times. Looking at the tall figure behind Chu Ping, Wu Qi could not help but have his heart give a violent jerk. No wonder when Chu Ping struck out a few times, the cultivation base he displayed did not look like the ability that a nascent divinity cultivator should have. It turned out that his main cultivation base was the primordial Tao of divinity, which allowed him to borrow the power of faith from the common people and instantly manipulate the power of faith, turning it into divine power for his own use. Judging from the size of the prime divine soul behind him, Chu Ping could increase his energy by about 10 times at most. Chu Ping was a mighty cultivator who had formed his nascent divinity, and if his energy was increased by 10 times, it would be a frightening overall strength that only a real heaven immortal could possess. What a ridiculously strong monster! Nevertheless, he has enjoyed several thousand years of incense burning on earth, and with the power of faith gathered together, it is more than enough to push him to his current level. Not to mention that he has the power of faith from the common people of Great Chu dynasty. All kinds of thoughts were tumbling in Wu Qi's mind along the way, as he followed Yan Dan and Chu Ping back to the mayor mansion located right in the center of Meng Fortress. Hand in hand, Yan Dan and Chu Ping walked into the main hall of the mayor mansion. All the ministers of Great Yan Dynasty were waiting quietly outside. Everyone could hear the heated discussion between Yan Dan and Chu Ping in the main hall, but no one could hear what exactly they were talking about. Both Yan Dan and Chu Ping exercised their divine abilities and dermic powers at the same time, disrupting their voices. Therefore, only the two of them could know what they were talking about, and what benefits they had offered in exchange. For a whole day and night, Yan Dan and Chu Ping sat in the main hall, having a heated discussion for the whole day and night. Wu Qi and the others were standing right outside the main hall, watching both men gesticulating and discussing for a full 24 hours. Finally, both men threw their heads back and laughed out loud. Then, Yan Dan invited them into the main hall, where he and Chu Ping personally wrote 2 copies of the document of alliance. After that, both men signed the agreement at the same time, stamped their fingerprints and seals, and announced it to the heaven and earth, swearing an oath with their prime nascent divinity. From today onwards, Great Yan and Great Chu were brothers. Neither Yan Dan nor Chu Ping announced the specific conditions of the exchange to the public. But, from now on, no one was allowed to use weapons recklessly between the two dynasties, and those who dared to provoke a war between the two dynasties would be killed without mercy. Yan Dan's 10 daughters, 100 granddaughters, and 1,000 great-granddaughters, the unmarried princesses of the imperial clan, would travel to Great Chu, marrying the sons of the imperial clan. Meanwhile, Chu Ping's 10 daughters, 100 granddaughters, and 1,000 great-granddaughters would also be sent to Great Yan, marrying the sons of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial clan. Both men also made an agreement that one of their daughters would be married to the crown prince of the other dynasty, becoming the crown princess of the other dynasty. The document of alliance was 36 feet long, with a total of over 200,000 words written on it. Only then did all the clauses of the Treaty of Alliance between the two dynasties were written on it. When the Treaty of Alliance was shown to the ministers of Great Yan Dynasty, some clauses were covered by restrictive spells, making it impossible for them to see what the secret conditions were. Obviously, these clauses involved the core secrets of both dynasties, and were not something that any random minister could know. After the Treaty of Alliance was established, Chu Ping did not stay any longer. He bid farewell and left swiftly. He did not mention Xiang Yu, nor did he mention anything about Wu Qi and Yu Ji. However, Wu Qi breathed out a sigh of relief. Since both dynasties had formed an alliance, then Xiang Yu would not be able to find trouble with him anymore, right? Chapter 248. Half a month had passed since the secret alliance between Great Yan and Great Chu was formed. During this period of time, it could be considered as peaceful. Great Yan, Daqin, and Great Chu did not make any big moves. Every day, only the scouts from Daqin and Great Yan would hunt and kill each other in the lofty mountains and lofty ridges of Meng Mountains, wiping out each other's eyes and ears. However, there were no more conflicts that involved more than 100 men, and no cultivators of Xiantian realm or above were involved in any battles. The Blackwater River was a small tributary of the Longyuan River. It flowed through a mountainous region where the rocks were as black as ink, causing the crystal-clear water of the Blackwater River to turn as black as ink. That was why it was called the Blackwater River. Although it had a rather unpleasant name, the banks of the Blackwater River were filled with abundant water plants, and countless wild flowers and trees grew along the river. Every spring, when the flowers bloomed, the banks of the Blackwater River would turn into a sea of colorful flowers, and the splendid colors stretched westward for several tens of thousands of miles. As the Blackwater River flowed through a canyon formed by the cracking of the Earth's crust, both banks of the river were rich in geothermal resources. Almost every few hundred miles, there would be a cluster of hot springs. Hot water kept gushing out from under the ground, and white steam drifted along the river valley. More than half of the valleys along the river were covered by a dense layer of water vapor. The rich geothermal energy, the dense water vapor, and the rich natural energy brought out from under the ground had nourished the flowers and plants along the banks of the Blackwater River, as well as all kinds of spirit herbs. Therefore, the Blackwater River was a famous place in the inner region of Meng Mountains. From time to time, demon kings from various mountains would send their little demons to the vicinity of the Blackwater River to harvest herbs, concoct all kinds of medicines for injuries, or concoct some lower-grade spirit pills. This place was the natural herb storehouse for all the cave abodes in Meng Mountains, a place frequented by demons and devils. Wu Qi threw his head back and gasped for breath. Using a wooden stick as a support, he climbed up a small hill lazily and gazed into the distance. Tens of miles ahead of him, the Blackwater River went around a lofty mountain, forming a small lake at the foot of the mountain that was so clear that one could see the bottom. The banks of the lake were filled with abundant water plants, and a large number of colorful wildflowers were blooming beautifully. Separated by a rock ridge that was no more than 10 feet high were 17 hot springs that formed a line. This string of hot springs was like a string of pearls sprinkled on the ground. The colors of the hot springs were gorgeous and dazzling. Yo, what a beautiful place! A three-tailed vixen swayed her slender waist as she climbed up the hill and walked to Wu Qi's side. Intentionally or unintentionally, she brushed Wu Qi's arm with her towering breasts. The beautiful three-tailed fox smilingly looked at the small lake, the beautiful grassland, and the 17 hot springs beside the lake. She giggled and said, "This is a great place to have fun. Duke of Tianyun, what do you think?" Wu Qi turned his head helplessly, gave the three-tailed fox a look and said, "Wu Qi, am just following the imperial decree to bring you here to find a hot spring with a beautiful scenery. As for the rest, I, Wu Qi, do not know." Panting noises were heard, as Catfish Flood Dragon swayed her huge catfish head and walked up to Wu Qi while twisting her fat body. She looked around blankly, shook her head and said, "Is this a good place? Is it beautiful? What's so good about it?" Brother Wu Qi, what do you mean by having fun with fun?" The three-tailed fox gave Catfish Flood Dragon a look of disgust, wagging her 3 snow-white tails. She turned her head away proudly, unwilling to give Catfish Flood Dragon another look. If not for the fact that Catfish Flood Dragon's cultivation base was ridiculously strong, at least 1,000 times stronger than her, a little demon fox of early-stage Jin Dan realm, according to her nature, she would have long mocked her. The so-called having fun with fun means using the earth as the bed and the sky as the blanket. Gently waving the folding fan, Sumai walked up the small hill swaggeringly. His eyes kept glancing at the three-tailed fox's voluptuous breasts as he said, "Senior Catfish Flood Dragon, you don't understand these romantic activities. Miss Lu Heng's eyes are indeed the best. I also feel this place is too beautiful to be described with words." The three-tailed fox, Lu Heng, giggled, while her watery, amorous eyes kept glancing at Sumai. Unknowingly, the man and the fox had gotten close to each other, and their bodies were rubbing against each other unintentionally. It was as if there was no one else around them, and they were extremely unscrupulous. Wu Qi stared coldly at Sumai. If there were no outsiders present, perhaps Sumai, a playboy, would have long had fun with this three-tailed fox. Sighing sadly in his mind, Wu Qi threw his head back and breathed out a long sigh into the sky. Why did he have to take on such an unlucky task? Half a month ago, on the day when Great Yen and Great Chu formed an alliance, Yen Dan had issued an imperial decree, ordering Wu Qi to bring his men to the depth of Meng Mountains and find a place with beautiful scenery and a romantic atmosphere. The imperial decree was issued without any rhyme or reason, but Wu Qi had no choice but to obey the order. Wu Qi was confident that he could find a place with such a beautiful scenery, and he believed that he was qualified to do so. But look at the people he brought with him. As Su Mei's disciple, Lu Heng was known as the vixen with the best taste and the most cultured in the arts. So, it was not a big deal for her to follow him to find a suitable place. Blackwater River was a branch of Longyuan River, and it was still acceptable for Catfish Flood Dragon to drive away all the aquatic demons they might bump into along the way. But what about Sumai? Could it be that she needed Su Mai, the ever-changing yin and yang, to check the geomancy of a place with beautiful scenery and a romantic atmosphere? Heavy footsteps were heard coming slowly, as Fan Jinqi, who had a tall and sturdy body, walked up slowly like a city wall. He was holding a heavy tiger-tooth halberd in his hand, and on his left wrist was a round shield that was 3 inches thick, while his entire body was clad in a heavy armor that was about an inch thick. When he came to the top of the small hill, he glared at Wu Qi coldly and cursed under his breath, "Shameless villain, a lowlife." Wu Qi looked up into the sky and breathed out a long sigh once again. It was fine if Su Mai, who was a fool in the head, followed them, but what was the point of bringing Fan Jinqi with them? A few months ago, during the palace banquet, this fellow had confessed his love to compete for Princess Zhongli's hand. But in the end, together with Su Mai, they were severely injured by Princess Zhongli's thunderbolts, and nearly turned into eunuchs. Was it because she was afraid that Wu Qi did not have enough troubles to deal with them? A light breeze came blowing, as Qin Qingshui, a skinny man with a long face and a skinny body, came running up the hill with a cold smile on his face. He gave Wu Qi a glance and said word by word, "When we look for women in a brothel, that is called dissolute. But, Duke of Tianyun, since you have won the favor of Princess Zhonglu, you still raped her? That is called a lowlife." "That's right." A cold voice was heard, as Qin Nihu, clad in a heavy green armor and a long sword hanging from his waist, came striding up the hill. He was the fierce tiger of Qin clan from Qin Wuyang's clan, the same Qin Nihu who had announced during the palace banquet that he would compete for Princess Zhongli's hand, and was nearly killed by the thunderbolts. Looking at the members of this team, Wu Qi felt like weeping, but had no tears. Su Mai had nearly fused with the three-tailed fox, and both of them were hugging each other. If not for the fact that there were so many people here, they would have taken off their clothes. Fan Jinqi, Qin Qingshui, and Qin Nihu had been mocking and ridiculing him along the way. Wu Qi wished he could kill them with a single punch, and then tell their elders that they were all eaten by demons. Yet, such a group of treasures had followed Wu Qi out to carry out the mission. No matter how Wu Qi looked at it, he felt that Yan Dan was trying to punish him. Coughing loudly, Wu Qi pointed at the small lake in the distance and cried out, "All right, this is the place. Lu Heng, Su Mai, take a look and see what the terrain is like here. We have been living in the wilderness for half a month, so quickly find a suitable place and return." Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, Su Mai and Lu Heng, who were still flirting with each other, quickly straightened their faces. Lu Heng sprung up into the sky and looked towards the hot spring, the lake, and the grassland. She counted with her fingers for a while, then nodded and said, "Good place. 5 colors enchant the mind, 5 fragrances confuse the mind, and the scenery here is beautiful. Moreover, it is surrounded by lofty mountains, which can hide the wind and gather the energy. If a man were to come here and see a lone girl, he would definitely have lustful thoughts." Lu Heng shrugged her chest complacently, laughed, and said, "With the mystic technique of my enchanting palace, this place will be like a young lady's chamber, where one will have lustful thoughts uncontrollably." Meanwhile, Su Mai took out a compass, observed the terrain of the surrounding mountains, nodded his head, and praised, 100 miles underground, there is a vein of earth core fire flowing through it. By drawing it up, we can construct an extremely powerful heavenly thunder and earthly flame formation, and it can also provide energy to all the weapons of Mo sect, enough to support them for 2 hours. Then, Wu Qi turned to look at Fan Jinqi and the other 2 young masters, and asked coldly, "What do you think, young masters?" Qin Qingshui flew 1,000 feet up into the sky, looked around, and praised satisfyingly, "The terrain here is very complicated, and there are many trees and trees in the surrounding forests. It is a good place to hide assassins. With 30,000 assassins here, it will be more than enough to stop the invasion of 1 million soldiers." On the other side, Fan Jinqi and Qin Nihu took a few rounds in the surroundings, nodded their heads satisfyingly, and said with a smile, "Within 1,000 miles, there are many valleys and caves that are suitable for hiding ice armors. As long as we carefully construct a restrictive formation that can conceal aura, it will be more than enough to hide several million armored soldiers. Even if Daqin attacks with all his forces, with this army of several million soldiers, we will be able to delay them for a few days. Wu Qi breathed out a deep sigh. Judging from the behavior of these few fellows along the way, it seemed they all knew the purpose of this operation. Yet, as the nominal leader of the team, he had no idea what was the purpose of finding such a place, and what was the reason behind it. Stomping his feet angrily, Wu Qi said furiously, "What are you whispering about?" Stunned, Qin Qingshui turned to look at Wu Qi. With a strange smile on his face, he said with a strange voice, "Duke of Tianyun, it seems you still don't know." "Of course, the reason we are looking for such a blessed place is to kill someone." Shocked, Wu Qi asked with a frown, "Kill who?" Qin Nihu said coldly, "The two dynasties will join hands and kill Qin." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.